Chapter 16:22. When Wasco stepped into Father Stella's church once again, Father Stella was drying his colorful underwear in the yard. Under the old man's black priest robe, it was indeed so colorful. Wasco shook his head violently to get rid of these strange distracting thoughts. That guy with the middle parting didn't come? Seeing that Father Stella was still drying his underwear and had no intention of stopping, Wasco could not help but ask in the end. The church was unusually quiet, as if nothing had happened. But Wasco clearly felt a strong fluctuation of power. It was clearly the fluctuation of holy power, and it was clearly not Stella's holy power. Speaking of which, Wasco still felt strange in his heart. Stella was clearly called a blasphemer by the descended angel, but he was still able to use that vigorous holy power. Middle parting? Only then did the priest stop and fell into his memories, then showed a sorrowful expression. They're all dead. Wasco opened his mouth. He obviously did not believe it. Dead? Wasco suddenly sneered. Where are the corpses? There's not a single corpse to be seen. Did you feed them all to the cats? How do you know? Father Stella was suddenly shocked, then said angrily, Wasco, I thought you were a good brother, so you've always had a hobby of peeking at me? Tell me, in the past, when we were bathing in the training camp, what were you doing behind my back? The priest was now shocked and angry. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. Needless to say how wronged he was. Wasco could only stare at him. Now, even he could not be sure whether Stella's mental state was good or bad, and whether what he said was true or false. But if it was said that the holy knights and clergy of the Holy Church had all fallen here, Wasco would never believe it. No matter what, this place should not be so peaceful. How long had it been since he took away those backup holy knights and settled them down before returning? Shaking his head, Wasco had no choice but to walk directly into the Holy Church. Perhaps the Holy Church's troops had not fully arrived yet. The powerful explosion of holy power just now might have been from the Holy Church's vanguard, but Stella had beaten them back. Most of the troops should be arriving soon. Wasco thought so and decided to stay and wait. Most importantly, no matter how he calculated, it seemed that he was the only one left in the Holy Church who could still talk to Father Stella, who was in a semi-crazy state. Hey, Wasco, I have here a collection of black and white films of the Feng Yu nuns that I've kept for 43 years. Do you want to watch them together? Well, even he can't speak properly. Wasco slammed the door shut and picked up the satellite phone. It's me. The church's troops haven't arrived yet. Anyway, I don't see them. The one leading the team this time is the angel Hamley. It's an angel of the middle three. Maybe something happened on the way. After all, this time they're using the inhuman domain. Try to persuade Stella not to offend Hamley. Pope, if Stella becomes a blasphemer, what do you want me to do? Wasco asked in a low voice. There was no response from the other end of the phone for a long time. When the Pope responded, he only said softly, Act according to your own will. Wasco, believe in yourself, and that is to believe in your faith. You old man who's about to die, you've said nothing. The furious veteran Holy Knight hung up the phone immediately. Wasco took a deep breath and simply sat cross-legged on the ground to meditate and recover his strength. His holy power had undergone a transformation after being suppressed by the mysterious young man, and it had not completely recovered until now. Holy City. They really don't give me any face at all. In the Pope's large secret chamber, the old Pope could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly after the private phone call was disconnected. But after the bitter smile, there was melancholy. In the vast Holy Church, Wasco was probably the only one who could talk to him without any taboo, right? Ever since Stella left the Godly Might prison, the nostalgic look on the old man's face became more and more intense. His memories had long since returned to his distant childhood, when he was just an inconspicuous shepherd in the village, and Wasco was the son of a coachman. Stella, on the other hand, was the foolish son of a landlord. The memories were very brief. After that, the nostalgic look on the Pope's face instantly disappeared, replaced by solemnity, doubt, and even fear. At this moment, on the desk in front of the Pope, there were 5 palm-sized angel statues, and without exception, these 5 statues were all in the state of having their heads cut off. They should have been statues with heads, and each statue represented the situation of the angels who had descended this time. The decapitation of the angel statues meant that. How could this be? I couldn't get in touch with any of the troops dispatched this time, and Wasco said that he didn't see the appearance of the main troops, but the statues. An ominous premonition was spreading in the old Pope's heart. After a long time, the Pope seemed to have made a decision, and resolutely reached out to turn the carving on the handle of the chair. With a click, the wall behind the chair in the large secret chamber he was in slowly opened, as if something was abruptly emerging from the crack in the wall that had just opened a little. The Pope drew in a cold breath abruptly, and in great shock, pressed both hands on the carving on the handle and turned it back in the opposite direction. The wall slowly closed up again. At this moment, the Pope seemed to have used up all his strength, and was already slumped in the chair, his face pale and drenched in cold sweat. A voice, a faintly discernible voice, seemed to have come from behind the Pope at this moment. "You will look for me. You will look for me again. I know. You will look for me again." The Pope got up at once, and hurriedly walked out of the large secret chamber without looking back. Today's class will probably end here. In the class, Professor Poulin was tidying up his lesson plans as usual, but the bell for the end of class did not ring, which was not in line with Professor Poulin's usual style. Everyone knew that Professor Poulin had the habit of talking for a few more minutes after class. Thus, in the large classroom, dozens of pairs of eyes were cast on Professor Poulin at this moment. Professor Poulin smiled at this moment, and then slowly said, "Also, this will be my last class to teach everyone." The classroom was suddenly filled with discussions and gasps of surprise. Professor Poulin gestured for a moment. "Due to some personal reasons, I have already resigned from my position at the Institute. But everyone can rest assured that after I leave, the Vice Dean will temporarily take over my classes. After the start of the next semester, the new teacher should take office, and your studies should not be affected. Or, it will be easier for you to get credits from the new teacher." Laugh. Naturally, no student could laugh. Although it was difficult to get credits from Professor Poulin, at the same time, Professor Poulin really did have the rich knowledge of those old professors, and thus his popularity in the Institute could be ranked in the top 10. Although he wasn't particularly handsome, he was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. His perpetual white shirt, black trousers, and gloves, perpetual round-rimmed glasses and long braids, as well as his harmless temperament, attracted the attention of a large group of bold flesh-type girls in the academy. A student stood up directly to ask a question. It was a girl. But Professor Poulin clearly did not intend to let the students ask questions. After a deep bow, he took his things and quickly left the classroom. A few bold girls hurriedly chased after him, but there was no trace of Professor Poulin in the corridor. A butterfly society. He could be considered a regular. Except for Claudia, who had started a new life, Professor Poulin was probably the one who came the most since the opening of a butterfly society. However, in the previous few times, only Boss Luo was left in the butterfly society. But this time, Miss Maid was obviously there too. Professor Poulin's impression of this female student was still 1 or 2 weeks ago, so he said apologetically, "What's your name again?" "Yu Yi," Miss Maid said with a smile. "Very happy?" Professor Poulin turned his head and looked at Boss Luo, then said with self-mockery, "I've lived for more than 30 years, and now I realize that I'm still alone." Boss Luo asked casually, "When are you going to officially leave, Professor?" "In a few days." Professor Poulin thought for a while and said, "I still have some things to do, and I plan to leave after dealing with them. I probably won't come back to this place in the future. I don't have the habit of staying in the same place twice, probably." "So," Boss Luo said thoughtfully. If we can meet you again, it will probably be in other places, right? Don't you have a phone? Professor Poulin laughed. Although I don't use the phone much, I still have a phone number. I also check the mail. If it's you, I'll still remember to check the mail occasionally. As he spoke, Teacher Poulin asked for a piece of paper and wrote down an email address. Miss Maid took the initiative to put away the slip of paper. Then, she poured a cup of tea for Teacher Poulin. She also took out 1, 2, 3, 4 plates of snack. It was quite sumptuous because of the sentence, very happy. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, I haven't finished reading your fairy tale book. I'll give it to you. After all, I've disturbed you so many times and came empty-handed every time. Professor Poulin smiled and said, It shouldn't be valuable. I just bought it from a farmer when I was traveling. It's said to be the original manuscript, but I think they cheated me and wanted to sell it for more money. It's the original manuscript, Boss Luo said abruptly, and it's quite valuable. For me, the story on each page is like a beautiful story told by my ear. Professor Poulin was stunned, then shook her head and smiled. I'm just a single lazy man in my 30s. Is it useless for you to make a good impression on me? I also have a small gift for you, Boss Luo said. Take it as a farewell gift for you. A gift box was quickly sent to Professor Poulin from Miss Maid's hands. Professor Poulin didn't have the habit of opening it after going back. After the exquisite gift box was opened, there was another wooden jewelry box the size of one. But after the box was opened, there was only a small amount of black soil inside. This is the soil of the red spider lily. Miss Maid smiled at this time. In addition to planting dead plants, it also has a very good effect of stabilizing the soil. Of course, this is what the gardener who sold us the soil said. Maybe he wanted to cheat us and sell it for more money. Professor Poulin was suddenly speechless, but she kept the box. Then she looked at Boss Luo and muttered, I like your gift. Then I'll accept it. It's good that you like it. Boss Luo nodded. Only then did Teacher Poulin stand up and resolutely say, Even though the time we spent together was very short, it was still a very pleasant memory. I hope we'll have the opportunity to meet again in the future. Oh, in any case, I'll still stay for 2 or 3 more days. Perhaps there'll be one last time we meet. Professor Poulin pushed open the door of a butterfly society and walked out of the old schoolhouse. At this time, the cup of tea he drank was still warm. In fact, he basically didn't touch it, and so did the snacks. Miss Maid said with pity, We wasted so much. What should we do? Boss Luo nodded casually on the table, and the snacks on the table disappeared. He smiled and said, Give them to Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming as a consolation gift. Of course, this was a good idea. Miss Maid gave him a sweet smile. Then, the door of a butterfly society was knocked on again, and the one who knocked on the door and walked in was Lamia's, wearing a rather formal dress. The professional dress perfectly revealed the slender and well-proportioned figure of this nun who had been exercising for a long time. Probably only a few buttons on her chest were a little forced. I saw you on the new enrollment list. Lamia's walked in with a smile. There are only 2 new students during this period, a boy and a girl. I think it must be you. Luochio, is this your name? I just know it now. While walking, the woman's black high-heeled shoes stepped on the wooden floor, making a clicking sound. Then, the charming face of Lamia's instantly became stiff, as if it was injected with excessive hyaluronic acid. The black high-heeled shoe on her right foot stepped into the floor at this time, and then broke. Hashtag. Chapter 1623. Lamia's had trained her body balance for many years. Even in such a sudden situation, she was able to adjust her body in an instant so that she wouldn't trip. However, the heel was broken, and it was broken so thoroughly that Lamia's felt that the heel wasn't broken by a piece of wood, but by something. In short, Lamia's maintained her smile, elegance, and calmness. As a female teacher, she finally walked to Boss Luo and Miss Maid. Lamia stretched out her hand to press down the skirt on her buttocks, and then sat down slowly in a lady's sitting posture. Miss Maid stood behind Boss Luo expressionlessly. Then she took away the cup that Mr. Poulin used. Soon she came out with a cup of tea and placed it in front of Lamia's. Smile. The tea was cold. She didn't even change the cup. Lamia's didn't speak until Miss Maid finished her work. Then she opened her mouth and said, "Mr. Luocchio, I thought that a powerful magician like you would study science like engineering. I didn't expect you to study the simplest theology." Was theology simple? Perhaps for the existence of, in human theology, mysticism was something that they would come into contact with from the beginning. Compared to the human scholars who studied in the academy according to historical records, it was more realistic to come into contact with them personally. "I'm not talented in science and engineering." Boss Luo shook his head and said, "Miss Lamia's, what's the matter? As a teacher in the academy, I should have the right to care about the extracurricular activities of the students, right?" Lamia's blinked and said, "Teachers should put the safety of the students first." Luocchio smiled and said, "I'm in the academy. It shouldn't be a big problem." Lamia's said, "That's not necessarily true. Even in the academy, it's not necessarily safe. Have you heard of a school shooting? A few years ago, a student came in with a gun and killed a student. It's very dangerous. As an inhuman, of course, he wouldn't be afraid of a small pistol in the hands of an ordinary student. This was just a topic to start a conversation. But what Lamia's didn't expect was that this young manor lord seemed to be really interested and started to ask questions. Of course, the school shooting that happened a few years ago was real, but Lamia's hadn't come to the school to teach at that time, so naturally, she didn't know too much. "I heard that the student who committed the crime didn't receive the expected punishment because of his mental state, but he was still expelled from the academy." Obviously, that was all she knew. Furthermore, she only knew about it because she heard it mentioned by other teachers in the academy. "Miss Lamia's lunch break is over," Miss Maid suddenly reminded him. "As a tutor of the academy, do you need to teach your lovely students in the afternoon?" "I'm on leave today." Lamia stroked her hair. "Luocchio, according to the agreement, during this period of time, I can freely move around the town, right?" "Of course," Lamia said with a smile. "In that case, my range of movement will be around you. That's fine too, right? After school, do you want to take my car back? Also, the suspension system of my car is very well made, it will be very comfortable." "No need." Boss Luo shook his head directly. "I'm used to taking a walk in the town after school. I'm not in a hurry to go back. Besides, we have classes in the afternoon. By the way," Boss Luo suddenly left his seat and walked to the cabinet at the side. He took out something and turned around to put it in front of Lamia's before continuing, "This is for you. It should be able to deal with the problem of your shoes temporarily." Looking at the all-purpose glue on the table, Lamia's eyebrows twitched unnaturally. She then picked up the glue and said indifferently, "Since you have classes, I won't disturb you, see you later." Miss Nunn walked quickly at this time because she stepped on the heel of the other side directly and broke it. Of course, it was well known that such high heels were naturally uncomfortable to walk in. "Go to class." Boss Luo acted as if nothing had happened. He took the servant girl's hand and gently squeezed it, then led her out of a butterfly society hospital, outside the door of the ICU. Mr. Smith had just returned from the shower when he saw a man in a suit sitting on a chair in the corridor outside the intensive care unit. He was in his 20s. Mr. Smith looked at the man's side profile and felt that he was quite familiar yet strange at the same time. "You seem to be a teacher of the college?" At last Mr. Smith recalled a face which he had occasionally seen in the olden days, a customer of his dining room. But somehow, Mr. Smith felt that this person seemed to be younger than before. Perhaps it was because of the makeup? Mr. Smith looked at the man in formal attire and thought thoughtfully. "Mr. Poulin or Teacher Poulin, Mr. Smith finally remembered the name of this restaurant's regular. "I'm passing by here," the man in formal attire said with a smile. "I heard that your wife is sick, so I plan to visit her. But it's not convenient to go in." Mr. Smith opened his mouth. In fact, they weren't familiar with each other. In the limited number of meals they had, they didn't talk much. They weren't friends at best, they knew each other. If the man said something like a good friend, Mr. Smith would probably be grateful, but the man's words were a bit abrupt at this time. "Thank you." Mr. Smith thought for a while and sat down beside the man in formal attire. "Deborah will be happy if she knows." The man in formal attire said, "Yes, when your wife smiles happily, she is the most beautiful person in the world." Mr. Smith frowned. The tone of the man in formal attire vaguely gave him a strange feeling, but he didn't show it. He just nodded and didn't speak anymore. He didn't take the initiative to speak. He even hoped that the man could take the initiative to leave and end this sudden encounter. "I brought some gifts." The man in formal attire looked at Mr. Smith and said, "I hope you can accept them." Mr. Smith looked at the box that the man had been holding in his hand and putting on his lap. From the beginning, when he saw the man in formal attire, he actually noticed the box. It was a black box wrapped in beautiful patterned paper. This pattern was even a kind of flower that Mr. Smith's wife, Mrs. Deborah, liked. How did he know? Mr. Smith was more confused in his heart and even frowned. The man in formal attire said, "I used to be depressed and hesitant. Loneliness almost swallowed me. I suffered countless failures, but your wife's smile saved me." It was a smile that could warm people's hearts. "So, please believe me, your wife will be the person I'm most grateful to. She gave me life." Mr. Smith couldn't help but be moved. He could feel the sincerity in the man's words. In front of him, he seemed to see a lonely figure that was worn away by life, walking on the street like an empty shell. Suddenly, a smile saved him who had lost hope in life. He also had such an experience when he met his wife. "I was saved by such a smile before, as if the black and white time was dyed with the color of the rainbow in an instant." Mr. Smith finally took the gift box from the man in formal attire. He thought for a while and said, "Do you want to see my wife? I can take you in, but only once." "No need." The man in formal attire shook his head at this time. "It's enough to be here. Besides, it's the first time to talk to you like this, Mr. Smith. I'll remember it." "I didn't say anything." Mr. Smith shook his head. "If there's a chance, I'll come again." The man in formal attire stood up and put on the tall hat at the same time. "Sorry to disturb you today, sir." What a strange guy. Looking at the back of the man in formal attire, Mr. Smith was a little dazed. He shook his head again and then walked into the ICU. After disinfecting and changing into clean clothes, Mr. Smith suddenly glanced at the gift box that was casually put aside when he entered the door. Perhaps on the day his wife wakes up and opens it herself, it would be a nice gift, wouldn't it? He hoped that day would come as soon as possible. He came to the bedside, pulled out his wife's hand from the quilt, and then held it tightly. Mr. Smith began to pray. His wife was a devout believer, and so was he later. Unconsciously, Mr. Smith lay on the bedside and fell into a deep sleep. He would suddenly fall asleep 1 or 2 times a day because of sleepiness, maybe because he was too tired. Every time he suddenly fell asleep, Mr. Smith would think so after waking up. What he didn't know was that every time he fell asleep, someone would gently open the door of the ICU, and then slowly walk in. A man in a white shirt and white glove. Looking at the two holding hands, the man in the white shirt, Mr. Poulin showed a gentle smile on his face. He liked the tranquility and the scene in front of him very much, no doubt. But in the more than 30 years of life, he had seen countless scenes, but only this ordinary couple had such a feeling of liking. "Should I also find a partner or something?" Looking at Mr. Smith holding his wife's hand, he suddenly thought of the pair of students in the Butterfly Society. Mr. Poulin couldn't help but have a strange thought. Sure enough, after being single for too long, seeing this kind of pair would cause one to suffer a critical hit. He shook his head, opened the gift box that the student gave him, and then gently sprinkled the flower paste of the red spider lily on Mr. Smith and his wife. Flower paste of the red spider lily. I've only heard of this kind of thing, but I've never seen it before, Mr. Poulin said as he sighed. Yellow spring, a saying of the Eastern Hell. As a professional theology teacher, Mr. Poulin had a good knowledge of theology, and the concept of the yellow spring flashed through his mind quickly. In mysticism, in the legends of the East, there was indeed a set of theories of life and death, reincarnation, and reincarnation that were far more complete than Western myth. But that was only a legend of the East. For Mr. Poulin, after a human died, there was only one place for the soul to return to, and that was the source of his death power. I hope I can see you being born in these few days. Mr. Poulin patted the layer of mud on his gloves, looking at Mrs. Deborah's bulging belly. His smile became gentler, a small life. He quietly left the ward. In the isolation room outside, a gift box wrapped in patterned gift paper attracted his attention. Stop. Mr. Poulin had the thought of opening this box. But at this moment, footsteps came from outside the door. Obviously, the nurse from the hospital came to patrol the room. Mr. Poulin hesitated for a moment, then directly pushed open the door and walked out. He just happened to meet the nurse. Mr. Poulin smiled and nodded unhurriedly, and the nurse also nodded subconsciously. Mr. Poulin then walked out with a natural expression. After a while, the nurse said to herself doubtfully, "This guy, didn't he just leave? When did he change his clothes and come back? How about I go to visit another old friend?" Outside the hospital, Mr. Poulin looked at the sky. The sun was setting in the west. That was one of the thousands of sunsets he had seen, ordinary and ordinary. In this small town, the only person who could be considered a friend, other than the new student whom he had just met, was probably Father Stryker, who would secretly put a few pages of erotic thoughts in the scriptures when he preached to the believers. He wanted to go and say hello before leaving. The sun was setting in the west. He had experienced thousands of sunsets, and his figure was stretched out on the long street under such an ordinary and ordinary sunset. Miss Maid inserted the key, and the beetle that was resurrected by Taisetsu's hands started again. Boss Luo sat on the co-pilot seat and obediently buckled the seatbelt. So Miss Maid drove the car happily out of the parking lot of the college. At the same time, another black beetle in the corner of the parking lot also started at this time. Lamias held the steering wheel with one hand, and put a cup of happy drink in the cup holder with the other hand. This was bought when she was bored waiting. Yes, she had been hiding in the car for the whole afternoon, and she even took a nap in the middle of the way. But when Lamias was ready to step on the accelerator and catch up with the car in front, the car suddenly shook, and then with a bang, the front of the car, billowing black smoke came out. The hashtag PS1, November 82, PS2, Lying Asleep, Chapter 1624. Most people lived an ordinary life. Unless something unexpected happened, no one would lose hope for the future. At night, Wasco woke up from his meditation. The holy power in his body had almost recovered. He asked himself if he met the mysterious young man again, he would probably be suppressed again. No one provided any reference for Wasco, but this was indeed the only thought in his mind at this time. The main force of the Holy Church had not appeared yet. He suddenly remembered what Father Stella said before, and felt a little uneasy. But when he remembered that the main force of the Holy Church was led by a four-winged, descending angel who was the leader of the descending angels, he felt a little relieved. The phone rang. It was a call from a few of the Holy Night trainees who were staying in the apartment outside. Wasco looked at the time and wondered if he had hit them too hard. They just woke up now. He picked up the phone, and a series of anxious questions came directly from the other side. "I'm fine. From now on, you all stay in the apartment until I come back. In the meantime, you can order takeout. After Wasco hung up the phone, he walked out of the room. He walked all the way until he saw Father Stella in the church. There were no lights in the church, but many white candles were lit. On the seats, on the floor, and even on the steps, the candlelight swayed because of the airflow brought by Wasco when he opened the door. He saw Father Stella sitting on the floor at this moment. There was a brazier in front of Father Strahl, and at this time, he was constantly throwing pieces of thick square paper into the brazier from who knows where. "What are you doing?" Wasco frowned and came in front of Father Stella. Father Stella looked up and made a shushing gesture. "Lower your voice, can't you see that I'm doing a religious rite? I'm ferrying the soul of the guy who died during the day." "Ferrying soul?" Wasco could not help but be startled and said subconsciously, "If you're ferrying soul, why don't you recite the scriptures and pray?" Of course, he knew what ferrying soul was. The clergymen of the Holy Church wandered in Europe and would subdue demons when they encountered ghosts. After subduing demons, they would naturally be ferrying soul. But Stella's method was obviously not the procedure of the Holy Church. He did not know what this stupid priest was up to. "You don't understand," Father Stella said seriously at this time. "The Holy Church's method won't work, I don't believe it. I learned this from the old monk who taught me Tongzigong. It's called burning clothes. I heard it's very effective." "You don't believe it, old bastard. You see, in the past, when we prayed for the souls of the dead, we didn't actually do anything. All we did was move our mouth. Those souls did leave, but they left with nothing. When he was alive, he was a pauper. After he died, he was still a pauper. How heartless and cruel was that? Burning clothes is different. Burn more money for them. Now that the times are advanced, they can even burn their girlfriends. TSK, look at how happy they are. This is solving the problem from the root." Wasco was taken aback by this charlatan's words. Finally, he recalled something. "Who exactly are you ferrying souls for?" Stella asked curiously. "Didn't I say that I'm ferrying the red coat in the middle and a bunch of useless holy knights and useless priests?" Wasco glared at Stella with a dark face. After a while, he pushed the door open angrily. If this was not the sacred place of the church, he would have kicked the door open. Father Stryker sat alone in front of the brazier and continued to burn his clothes. Tom Cruise crawled out from under the stool and rubbed against Father Stryker's thigh in a fawning manner. The priest suddenly slapped his thigh hard. "Oh no, what if I die that day and no one burns clothes for me?" As he spoke, the priest grabbed Tom Cruise and grabbed a bunch of gold and silver paper treasures. He hurriedly walked into the courtyard and dug a hole to bury the paper treasures. Then, he propped up Tom Cruise's eyes and aimed at the burying hole. He said earnestly, "Remember this place. My sexual happiness in the underworld depends on you." Tom Cruise struggled to escape from Father Stella's hands. Before he left, he scratched the priest's face, but there was no scratch. Father Stella chased after him while cursing, and disappeared in an instant. Marlotta, who was forgotten in the corner of the courtyard and had shackles on his hands and feet, poked his head out nervously at this moment, and then shrunk back. Last night, he picked up a broken saw blade. At this time, he was trying hard to break the shackles on his feet, and it looked like he was about to succeed. This time, he was not going to collect supplies. He planned to wait until the shackles on his feet were broken, and then sneak out of this church with the big iron ball. Although this church must have some incredible treasures, Marlotta was not in the mood at all. As to why he thought that there were treasures hidden in the church, others did not know that this church was actually suddenly transformed from a big hole, but how could he not know? The destroyed church had reappeared out of thin air. But at this time, he really did not have the mood to care about the treasures that might be hidden in the church. He felt the power of Hades. The power that instantly took away the lives of all the paladins and clergymen was exactly the same as described by the Lord of Darkness of Soth God Clan. Marlotta lost the crystal that the Lord of Darkness gave him to sense Hades, But he did not use the crystal, did he not? Marlotta even felt that his lost luck came back again. So, the speed of his hands that were rubbing the iron chains increased again, and his palms were almost bleeding. His breathing became faster and faster, and his eyes were bloodshot, like a bull. When Lamias returned to the manor, it was already after dinner. At this time, the nun lady's face was black and gray. Her car was basically scrap. Fortunately, under her pitiful appearance, there were still male students who volunteered to send her to the vicinity of the manor. But there was a partial torrential rain, and Lamias even fell into a muddy hole. When she climbed out, she happened to see a wild boar that was looking for food. God knew why a wild boar would appear in such a place. But after years of training, although she was a human, her physical fitness was not just for show. At least, she escaped the misfortune of being eaten by the wild boar and successfully escaped. But along the way, she was in a panic and did not choose the path carefully. Her clothes were inevitably torn by weeds and branches, and she even lost one of her shoes. When she finally saw the light on the wall of the manor's gate in an unprecedented sorry state, Lamias was so moved that she almost had the impulse to kneel down and pray devoutly. Then she stepped on a sea urchin. Why? She seemed to be desperate for life, silently pulling out the sea urchin from the soles of her feet. Finally, she walked into the manor and came to the door of the house in a daze. Before she knocked on the door slowly opened. A ray of warm light shot out from the crack of the door, and then it was the servant girl's dim figure before the light and shadow. "Oh, Miss Lamias, you're back?" the servant girl said in surprise at this time. "It's so late, you should inform us. Dinner time is over." Lamias sneered in her heart. "Inform? Have you ever told me your phone number?" "Don't worry." The servant girl smiled and said, "If you feel hungry, I can prepare food for you right away. I'm still very confident about my cooking." Lamias didn't want to eat the food given to her, but thinking that she really didn't eat anything today, her ordinary body couldn't bear it. Even if the servant girl made things difficult for her, Lamias was not a vegetarian. She had been receiving various difficult trainings since childhood, and had tried all kinds of exotic ingredients. As long as it was protein, it was crispy. "Then I'll have to trouble you. I happen to be a little hungry." Lamias smiled. Even if she looked quite bad at this time, she still had to keep smiling. But when she looked at a plate of sea urchin dishes in front of her, Lamias felt that she seemed to be too naive. "Well, Miss Lamias, I wish you a pleasant meal," the servant girl whispered at this time. "In addition, after 9 o'clock, I hope you can keep quiet, or you will disturb the master's rest. I usually go to bed early." The servant girl nodded and left in a happy mood. Lamias looked at the big bowl of sea urchin rice, hesitated for a moment, and finally the instinct of replenishing strength overcame her worry, and she took a small bite. Delicious. She didn't expect it, so she opened her eyes wide at once. She felt that her whole body seemed to be washed. Even her messy hair seemed to be much smoother. Ding! The iron chain had been sawed off unknowingly. When the moment came, Marlotta couldn't help but have a feeling of tears in his eyes. He was too difficult. From a senior cadre of Soth God clan to a mortal after losing his power, until now, he knew the preciousness of power. "Hello." But before Marlotta had time to be moved by himself, he suddenly heard a voice behind him, which suddenly made Marlotta, who was always frightened, jump up at once. "It's you." At the window of the dim room, the figure standing there was Teacher Poulin, who sent him to Father Stella. He was tricked by this seemingly harmless man in a white shirt and fell into this trap. "I'm here to see you." Teacher Poulin smiled slightly. "I'm leaving soon. It seems that you're living well now, very well." "You're leaving?" Marlotta suppressed his anger at once, and frowned at the same time, subconsciously asking, "Why?" "To see other sceneries." Teacher Poulin said quite casually, "Life is a non-stop journey, and I like to see the sceneries along the way." My Lotta shook his head, holding the big iron ball out of the utility room with some difficulty. Let's make a deal. Before you leave, can you help me get rid of this thing, and I'll owe you a favor? Teacher Poulin thought for a while, and won my Lotta's request. He reached out and broke all the chains on my Lotta's body. My Lotta was silent for a while, and then asked, "Give me a way to find you, I don't owe favors to others." Teacher Poulin shook his head. "I introduced you here, but I didn't expect you to suffer some hardships. Forget about the favor, just take it as a little compensation. In addition, as a mortal, it's really not easy." My Lotta didn't comment. Teacher Poulin smiled and said, "Although it's not easy, they are still very strong to live. And I'll go and say hello to Father Stella." Watching Teacher Poulin walk toward the church, my Lotta couldn't be happier. Who knew where that old faker would come from to knock him a few more times? He was really afraid of Father Stella, and he couldn't understand it with common sense. At this time, Teacher Poulin was going to pester him, so it was naturally better. Freedom. He felt this aura again, and his heart was filled with courage and hope for the future. It was as if there was a brand new strength gushing out, and his footsteps couldn't help but become more steady. He felt something strange coming from the bottom of his feet, and he couldn't help but look down. It was the shards of the chain that had been broken by Teacher Poulin and thrown on the ground. He had inadvertently stepped on them and shattered them. Of course, he couldn't step on the shards of the chain, maybe in the past, but obviously not now. My Lotta subconsciously crouched down and extended his hand to grab a section of the iron chain. At this moment, the iron chain in his hand suddenly decayed and then broke apart. Not only that, the areas where the iron chain touched, the grass even began to wither. This is... Teacher Poulin found Father Stella in the confessional of the church. When he found him, the priest's face was covered with an indescribable magazine, and his snoring wasn't very loud. Teacher Poulin gently knocked on the door of the small dark room in the confessional. Father Stella woke up with a start, and quickly put away the magazine while wiping his saliva. "Oh, sponsor Daddy who donated money. No, lost traveler, please tell me what you feel guilty about. I am Father Stella, and I can help you." "Hey, it's you? Why are you here again after such a short time?" Teacher Poulin only felt that this concept was strange, but he didn't think too much about it. He just smiled and said, "I will be leaving here in 2 days. Now that I think about it, I haven't entered your confessional even once, so I want to experience it. Can I talk to you?" "Money, forget it, we are acquaintances." Father Stella shook his head and lowered his head to continue reading the magazine. However, he allowed Teacher Poulin to enter. Teacher Poulin didn't mind. After sitting down, he thought for a while and asked, "Father, what do you think death is?" The priest casually turned a page of the magazine, and without thinking, he said perfunctorily, "Those without money die of poverty, those without girlfriends die of masturbation, those who are unlucky die of a car crash, those who are rich, how the hell do I know what cards they have to play to kill themselves? In any case, I can't kill you, all right, next." Teacher Poulin smiled and suddenly said, "Do you want to kill me?" Father Stella was startled, and suddenly raised his head. He looked at Teacher Poulin through the lattice on the wooden board of the small dark room. After staring at him for a while, he asked tentatively, "Is your head okay? I will fight with you, don't try to scam me, I don't have money." Teacher Poulin smiled again, stood up, and said softly, "Goodbye." Chapter 16:25. When Mr. Poulin left, Father Stella didn't ask him to stay. He didn't even want to come out of the confessional small dark room. Mr. Poulin didn't care. He looked up at the stars. The stars were dim, and it seemed like a storm was coming. Most seaside towns were like this. Maybe there would be a light rain before dawn. Mr. Poulin planned to go to the hospital again. Before he left, if there was nothing special, he should be there. He knew that the little life would be born in 1 or 2 days. When he went out, someone stood in front of Mr. Poulin and stopped him. "My Lotta, you haven't left yet. Is there anything else?" Mr. Poulin asked curiously. At this time, my Lotta looked at him strangely. But my Lotta said, "There is something I want to ask you." "What is it?" My Lotta thought for a while and said, "Your power. Is your power related to death?" When those broken chains fell to the ground, the grass nearby had already dried up. Even the ants in the soil died. Teacher Poulin couldn't help but furrow his brows. He actually didn't care that my Lotta knew about this matter. What he cared about was that his death energy had unexpectedly already overflowed, and he himself hadn't noticed it. He subconsciously looked at the gloves he used to confine the power of death. In theory, this pair of gloves could prevent the power of death from leaking out. It seemed that after the fourth explosion of the power of death, the effect of this pair of gloves had begun to lose its effect. It seemed that his decision to leave was not wrong. "Don't you already have the answer in your heart?" Mr. Poulin shook his head and said, "Why do you still ask me personally?" As expected, my Lotta was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly walked to Mr. Poulin. His eyes were blazing. "The goddess of luck didn't abandon me. It turns out that I was so close to my goal. Do you know that I came here all for you?" "Well, I don't want to know now," Teacher Poulin said lightly. After that, he took half a step back lightly. It was mainly because he was bald, muscular, and strong. It was really very difficult to reverse his approval of a certain concept. "Nether King." My Lotta took a deep breath and said, "Does your power come from Hell King? Tell me, where is the King of Hell?" "Nether King?" Teacher Poulin subconsciously furrowed his brows. Even if he wasn't a theology teacher who had already left his post, as someone who walked between non-humans and humans, he obviously knew which ones the underworld king was referring to. Because most of the myths in the world were chaotic, and some of the myths were intertwined with each other and evolved, there were actually a few gods who were called Pluto. Of course, since they were Pluto, they could naturally be associated with death. "I don't know the Nether King." Teacher Poulin shook his head at this time. "I can indeed control some abilities that bring death, but it seems to be innate. It shouldn't be from Pluto, as you said." "Impossible. You lied to me." My Lotta was agitated at this time. He didn't care that he had no power and directly grabbed Teacher Poulin's arm. "You must know where the Nether King is." Perhaps Teacher Poulin really didn't know where the Nether King was, because he himself might be the Nether King. This thought flashed through my Lotta's mind almost at the moment when he recognized the power of death. But it was also denied in the next moment. What was the Nether King? The Nether King was the murderer of the Greek gods. It was the ultimate weapon created by the master of the underworld to fight against Mount Olympus. The existence of the Nether King would only bring death to the world. If Teacher Poulin was the Nether King, the present world would have become the new underworld. My Lotta had seen the Nether King before. When he first came to the present world with his companions, he had already met the Nether King. His companions died because of the appearance of the Nether King. My Lotta couldn't see the Nether King's appearance clearly at that time, but he could remember the feeling that the Nether King gave people. The feeling that the ordinary teacher and the man in the black suit gave people was completely different. So, Teacher Poulin must have come into contact with the Nether King and then obtained a trace of the power of death from the Nether King. Even if it was just a trace of power, it was enough to make Teacher Poulin strong. After all, the Nether King was created by the master of the underworld. It was a super weapon that even the gods on Mount Olympus were terrified of. "I have no reason to lie to you." Teacher Poulin pushed my Lotta's hand away. He was afraid that he couldn't control himself. If the power of death leaked to my Lotta's body again, it would probably cause him to lose a lot of life or even death. "No, no, no." My Lotta was a little panicked. "Listen to me. I'm looking for the Nether King, but I don't mean to destroy it. You don't have to worry at all. On the contrary, the reason why I came to find the Nether King is to invite it back. Only the Nether King can let our Soth God clan regain the glory of the past." So, in fact, you still want to obtain the power of the Nether King, right? Teacher Poulin shook his head and said, I hope that the power of the Nether King can fulfill your wish. You don't understand. You really don't understand. My Lotta said emotionally, the Nether King is a remnant of the God clan. It is the power of the God clan. No matter which side it belonged to in the War of the Gods, the most important thing is the present. The current Soth God clan. We are all descendants of the gods. We are inseparable. Whether it is the sky, the sea, or the remnants of the underworld, we are already closely connected. We only want to restore the glory of the age of the gods. You can use the power of death. In theory, you are also a member of our Soth God clan. You also have an obligation to contribute to the great revival of the Soth God clan. Poulin, believe me, you will become the hero of our clan. You will be the only son of death. My Lotta was really trying to express something. Teacher Poulin could feel the urgency in his heart. Unfortunately, I am not interested in this. Moreover, the power of death in my body will not be of help to anyone. Apart from bringing death, it has no other use. If you want to find traces of the Nether King, I suggest you go to the European continent. That is the origin of Hades. Of course, you can also go to ancient Egypt to dig. Maybe you can find clues about Osiris. Anyway, it is the Nether King. The Lord of Darkness. My Lotta gritted his teeth and said, I will take you to see the Lord of Darkness. After you see it, you will understand everything and believe me. The Lord of Darkness? The Lord of Darkness is a great existence that survived the War of the Gods. My Lotta said with a pious face, the great Lord of Darkness is different from us descendants of the gods. It is the real deal. Since the age of the gods, it has been a real god. It is the true god of the Soth God clan. Its knowledge will lead us back to the peak and take back the god kingdom from the shameless thieves of the Magician Association. The gods are dead, but the so-called Lord of Darkness survived. It is really not easy. Teacher Poulin nodded. Okay, I will go with you to meet this Lord of Darkness. Anyway, I have always been very interested in the origin of the power in my body. Then what are you waiting for? My Lotta was instantly overjoyed. He could not wait to grow wings and fly back to the Soth God clan to meet the Lord of Darkness. But he suddenly remembered another thing. Having lost his power, he could not open the coordinate channel to the inhuman domain. Do you have the coordinates to enter the inhuman domain? Teacher Poulin sized my Lotta up from head to toe. He only looked at this baldy who was almost 2 meters tall, so ashamed and indignant that he couldn't raise his head. Only then did he slowly say, I don't have this kind of thing, but it seems that there are a few public coordinate channel stations in the modern world. I actually passed by a few before. You have not been to the inhuman domain, even once? My Lotta said in disbelief. Teacher Poulin shook his head. I was not interested in it before. The modern world is very big, and there are many places I have not been to. There is no need to go to new places. Then let's go now. Not now. Teacher Poulin shook his head. I have to wait for 2 more days before leaving here. Okay. 2 days it is. My Lotta said without thinking. But in these 2 days, you are not allowed to leave me. Tell me more about the Socius God clan. Teacher Poulin waved his hand. There is also the matter of Hell King. I have to go to the hospital now, so let's talk on the way. In that case, the Lord of Darkness is actually a pitiful fellow sealed in the stone wall, and your Socius God clan is just a small group that has been suppressed by the Magician Association and is forced to hide, right? On the way, looking at Lotta's expression that almost wanted to go berserk, Teacher Poulin pushed up his glasses and said very helplessly, after listening to you say so much, I keep feeling that your Socius God clan is really doing something that has no future. How about your Soth God clan reconcile with the Magician Association? What did you say? My Lotta almost screamed. Teacher Poulin pushed up his glasses again and said, You also said that your Sovereign God clan has already undergone a split. A portion of your clansmen have already integrated into the Magician Association, and it seems that some of them have reached the top. I feel that this portion of clansmen who left are very far-sighted. If the remaining people of your clan nod, the final result will probably be a happy ending? Impossible, Mylota said angrily. The Magician Association only intends to dilute and assimilate our bloodline to obtain the power of the gods from us. The power of the great gods can't be tainted by mortals. Teacher Poulin smiled and said, "Let me think. If the knowledge I learned didn't lie to me, the gods in the era of the gods were more open. They almost sowed everything?" Mylota trembled with anger. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have the power now, he would have knocked this guy unconscious and tied him up to bring him home. "Okay, I'll still go and see the Lord of Darkness that you worship," Teacher Poulin said coldly. Mylota calmed down a little. "I said so much, and now it's your turn. How did you get the power of Hell King?" "I said that I had it since I was young." Teacher Poulin shrugged. "It's like a talent," Mylota sneered in his heart. "Keep pretending. When the Lord of Darkness goes to the Lord of Darkness, I'll see how long you can keep your mouth shut." At this time, Mylota suddenly remembered something. It was the death of the knights and clergymen of the Holy Church during the day. Although he didn't see who did it, he clearly felt the shroud of the power of death. Now that he knew that Teacher Poulin also had the power of death, he directly made the connection. So, Mylota directly looked at Teacher Poulin and asked, "Oh right, do you have a grudge with the Holy Church?" "No." Teacher Poulin shook his head. "Why do you ask?" "No." Mylota frowned. "If not, why did you harvest the lives of those holy knights and clergymen during the day? Was it to help that old faker Stella?" Teacher Poulin suddenly stopped. It wasn't because of Mylota's last words, but because a passerby suddenly fell down in front of the road. This person had just walked past the streetlight on the sidewalk, and then suddenly fell down, without any warning. A drunkard? Mylota frowned. Who would suddenly fall down in the street like this? Many of them were drunkards. "No." Teacher Poulin said, "He is dead." "Dead?" Mylota was a little surprised, but he didn't panic. His hands were once stained with blood. In the early days of the inhuman domain, there were all kinds of violence and blood. If he is dead, then he is dead. What's so strange about it? Humans are so fragile. But suddenly, he remembered what he had suffered in the church as a powerless person. He suddenly felt irritated and shut his mouth. "No, it's very strange." Teacher Poulin directly walked up and came to the side of the dead passerby. He squatted down and carefully examined. "What's strange?" Mylota asked from behind. Teacher Poulin thought for a while and said, "He will indeed die, and it will be in the near future. Because his body is not very good and he has heart disease. But it won't be today. His time has been prematurely ended." "You mean to say that he was actually killed?" Mylota said with dissatisfaction. "Just say it directly. Why make it so complicated?" Teacher Poulin shook his head. There were some things that he couldn't explain to Mylota in detail. Not everyone was like his new student, who had outstanding comprehension ability. "Look!" Mylota suddenly shouted in a low voice. He was talking about the road ahead. The people who were walking sparsely on the road ahead suddenly fell to the ground one after another. Bang! A car suddenly lost control and crashed into the entrance of a clothing store on the side of the road. "Who?" Teacher Poulin looked at the chaotic and strange street in surprise. People were actually dying one after another. Ending the life of this town prematurely, //. Chapter 1626. The pedestrians didn't make any sound as they fell down one by one. Then, they stopped breathing and welcomed death. Mylota was shocked, but he didn't lose his composure. He checked them one by one. After walking forward for about 10 meters and seeing 3 corpses, he couldn't help but be surprised. Could it be a curse? He didn't see any fatal wounds on the townsfolk, so he could only deduce that an inhuman might have dealt a mental blow to them. But in fact, even if a mental blow had been dealt, the human body should still be active for a short period of time. But these people lost all their vitality in an instant. Mr. Poulin looked up at the sky and didn't say anything. "What are you looking at?" My Lotta's heart trembled. He felt that he might have missed something because his power was sealed. "You can see now." Mr. Poulin reached out his hand and tapped on my Lotta's forehead. See? My Lotta's eyes immediately focused. He saw that under the night sky, little bits of light were slowly floating into the sky. The light was like fireflies. It was a beautiful scene, but at the same time, it was terrifying. This was because these fluorescent lights were the souls of people who had died. They could become spirits, ghosts, or evil spirits. It all depended on the environmental conditions at the time. But obviously, these souls didn't become anything. They were just in their original state. My Lotta immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He suddenly realized what Teacher Poulin meant when he said that the town's time had ended. Someone, or rather, some power was harvesting all the lives in this town. Pluto! In an instant, the answer appeared in my Lotta's mind. Pluto had appeared. Only Pluto could bring death. I found it. I finally found it. The ecstasy instantly swept away all of my Lotta's gloominess. He laughed wildly and was about to chase in the direction where the souls were gathering. Hell King would definitely be at the end of the gathering of souls. "You better not be too far away from me." But at this moment, Teacher Poulin's words were like a basin of cold water, making my Lotta feel as if he had sucked in a breath of extremely cold air. "Leave me too far, and you will also become like them." My Lotta, who had just taken a step forward, stiffened his body in an instant. The foot he had just lifted stopped abruptly. He instinctively shuddered, and with an ugly expression, he turned around and asked, "What do you mean?" "You will die." Teacher Poulin's answer was unusually simple and crude. "Are you going? You will definitely go, right? That's where the souls of the dead go." My Lotta looked at Poulin anxiously and said, "I seem to hear the call of Hades. It's summoning me." Teacher Poulin said, "No, you are just too excited, so you are hallucinating. It is not calling for anyone. Wake up, don't dream." "I don't believe it." My Lotta's eyes seemed to spit fire. "Then take 5 steps forward." Teacher Poulin thought for a while and said, "Beyond 5 steps it is no longer safe. I have already reminded you, your life is in your own hands." My Lotta took 4.5 steps. At the last half step, his whole body was covered in cold sweat, as if he could not take another step no matter what. He even felt despair. Cowardice, fear, and all kinds of negative emotions exploded. Recalling the experiences of these days, the pride of the past was instantly shattered, and the last bit of self-respect he had left was completely trampled on by life. "I am just a piece of sh*t." He clenched his teeth and finally took the last half step. He closed his eyes tightly. Even if he really welcomed death at this moment, he was already fearless. He felt as if his soul had been sublimated, and only felt his whole body relax. But he did not die like Teacher Poulin said. He was still standing, and nothing in front of him changed. "I am not dead. I am not dead." My Lotta was absent-minded at this moment, and then ecstasy followed. "Ha ha ha ha. I am not dead. Did you see, Hades did not take my life. It must have sensed the blood of the gods in my body. I will become one of its people. Gods will not slaughter their own people. No, it is just that I am behind you." Teacher Poulin's voice came from behind my Lotta, neither slow nor fast. My Lotta broke down. Looking at the 5 steps in front of him, he suddenly lost the courage to take another step. But Teacher Poulin continued to walk forward, and my Lotta suddenly trembled, quickly followed, and asked anxiously, "Where are you going?" "To see what happened," Teacher Poulin said indifferently. Besides, I also want to see what Hades looks like. If there is really a Hades, maybe it can answer some of the questions I have all along." Mylota did not say anything. As long as Teacher Poulin was willing to go, it seemed to be good. Although he had lost the power as an inhuman, he was very sure that Hades was there. At this time, in the town, more and more townsfolk were falling down. The range was not limited to the center of the town, but had already spread to the surroundings. Those souls that slowly floated into the night sky and were attracted by something, gathering in the same place, gradually increased. It was like a large wetland, and then it came to midsummer night. Deep sea. There were countless sea routes here, no matter whether it was above sea level or below sea level. It was even a mysterious area that had far more secrets than the land. A huge shadow was moving under the sea. In the gloomy depths of the sea, the body of this huge creature was constantly flashing with different kinds of faint light. In the huge monster. Report: the wreckage of the Nautilus has been found. Do we want to explore it? As the captain of another huge submarine of the Black Order, Justin was one of the masterminds of the new faction. When the subordinate was reporting, Justin was thinking about the intention of the religious order's chief. He was a little confused, because almost 80% of the Black Order's headquarters power was used this time. In other words, this submarine sailing in the deep sea at this time was almost all the power of the Black Order. Those who stayed were only some field personnel and ordinary members who did not have access to the core. They stayed only to let the headquarters operate at a minimum level. Why would the chief give such an order? Not only that, even Master Pride was directly brought along. Even the things like the 100-year plan were directly moved into the submarine. Speaking of which, it was fortunate that this submarine was not a product of the civilization on the land, otherwise, there was no way to prepare everything in such a short time. At this time, the subordinate's report interrupted Captain Justin's thoughts. If he was the one sailing this time, he could give the order immediately, but the chief of the Black Order was here. Captain Justin had no choice but to contact the chief directly to ask about the Nautilus, but the answer he got was, there was no need to waste time on a silent Nautilus, land as soon as possible. His tone was resolute, as if this Nautilus was just an insignificant wooden boat. This Nautilus was once the most powerful submarine of the Black Order, and even now, many of its functions were still incomparably powerful. But the chief's order could not be disobeyed. This was a belief that came from Justin's heart. Although the Black Order was divided into the new faction and the old faction, and although the secret struggle between the two factions was fierce, as long as it was the chief's order, they could not disobey it. Every core member of the upper echelon of the Black religious congregation had a spiritual suggestion placed on them by the chief. Under the influence of the chief's enormous spiritual power, these core members were like puppets. The new faction and the old faction were fighting endlessly because of Master Pride, but that was only because the chief had been silent. At this time, when the chief gave the order, the Black Order mobilized most of its overall strength in the shortest time possible. It could be said that they had turned out in full force. Unlike the Holy Church, which was intertwined, the Black Order was completely a one-man order of the supremely talented chief. Find a suitable landing point as soon as possible. At this time, Captain Justin directly gave the order. At the same time, a guy who gave him an incomparable headache appeared in front of Captain Justin's eyes. What appeared on the screen was the extremely ugly face of Master Pride. Not only that, some scenes in the room also appeared in front of Captain Justin's eyes at the same time. Although it was only some of the scenes in the corner, when Captain Justin saw half of the girl's body covered with scars, his eyebrows suddenly twitched. There aren't enough toys, send some more. Master Pride only said this one sentence, and then directly turned off the communication. In the control room, a group of subordinates looked at the captain one after another. Captain Justin heaved a sigh of relief at this time. He lay down rather weakly. He looked at the angry eyes of his subordinates and finally sighed. He waved his hand and said, "This time, send a few more over. For the future holy war and rise, some sacrifices are necessary." In the control room, an extremely oppressive silence suddenly filled the air. Why did they have to constantly satisfy Pride's request? Wouldn't it be better to directly control him and torture him? How could Captain Justin not know what these young people were thinking? But what these young people didn't know was that this Master Pride couldn't be killed, and he couldn't even be controlled. He could refine his own body into something else, and thus break away from all seals. The so-called barriers could also be directly refined by him, and become ions drifting in the air. As for human firearms, in Master Pride's eyes, they were nothing but a pile of scrap iron. More importantly, if you couldn't kill him, he would kill you. Rather than saying that the Black Order obtained the right to cooperate with Master Pride by satisfying his request, it was better to say that in order to obtain Pride's help, the Brotherhood did everything they could to curry favor with Pride. The relationship between the two sides was already unbalanced from the very beginning. After turning off the communication in the luxurious room, even though they had moved to a place sailing under the sea, Pride still insisted on a comfortable environment. This room originally belonged to the chief of the Black Order, but now he had taken it. A bunch of slaves. Master Pride immediately sneered. "You've already missed the opportunity to control me." The opportunity to control him was only at the very beginning, when he had fallen into this small world. He had been suppressed by this small world to the point that he had almost completely lost his power, and even an ordinary person could kill him. Now, after a period of recuperation, he had already analyzed part of the world will of this small world, and had written in some of the rules from his origin small world, allowing the ability of alchemy of composition to be used. After that, the Black Order was no longer in his eyes. The reason why he had stayed was because he needed some slaves in this small world, and he was also quite interested in the things that the Black Order lived in. That was why he had been patient enough to play around. The Demon King of Alchemy, the man who used despair to rule the world. This was Pride's life before he left his origin small world. He could have continued his life of toying with the entire world, but after his power had reached the end of its peak, he had actually gone insane and wanted to turn the world will into his own plaything, and in the end, he had become a tool for the world will to destroy his civilization. However, Pride was indeed a saddened and insane person. When his civilization was destroyed, he did not hesitate to mobilize most of the alchemists in the Empire, and used billions of life force to create a passage to this small world. He had even refined his own body into a philosopher's stone that could store the power of alchemy of composition and entered the void. A general's success was built on the bones of 10,000 men, and his success was the destruction of the entire empire. My power is still far from being restored. Master Pride was thinking about something as he enjoyed the service of a prostitute in fear and trepidation. He had fought with his enemy in a crack, and in the end, because of a terrifying ripple that disturbed the dimension, he had lost his footing and fell into this small world where the gods' beliefs were extremely chaotic and abnormally diverse. Pride believed that if he could survive, his enemy could do the same. Otherwise, he would have already destroyed his enemy in the void. Therefore, there was no guarantee that his enemy was currently hiding in that corner of this world, secretly developing and accumulating power. "You're hurting me." Suddenly, Master Pride snorted coldly and swung his fist. Before the prostitute could say anything, her neck had already been broken by Pride. He liked the feeling of torturing and killing young girls, especially women who were beautiful and beautiful, goddesses in the eyes of countless people. The feeling of torturing and killing them was even more addictive. The moment the young girl's neck was broken, she was immediately thrown away by Pride. He swept his gaze around and saw another girl hiding in the corner, shivering as she crawled over. However, at this moment, the screen in the luxurious room suddenly turned on, and what appeared in front of Master Pride's eyes was an abnormally old face that was covered in wrinkles. "Pride, are you awake?" The old man was the chief of the Black Order. #######PS1. There's a catch-up tonight later. Try to finish it before 12:30. PS2. Also, I'll recommend a new book that needs to be watered with love to grow. Player Super Justice, by 10 Strings Buki. Chapter 1627. In a luxurious room, the moment the Chief of Black Order appeared on the screen, the few conscious girls in the room instantly fainted. "Pride, you should be in the lab right now, preparing for the refinement work," the old man on the screen said weakly. "If you want to enjoy it, I'll continue to satisfy your requests after the refinement." Master Pride sneered, looking at the old man who was about to die at any moment. How could he not know that this old man's life was already at its limit? What a pitiful fellow, having to endure the fear of death every moment. "You seem to have forgotten your identity." Master Pride shook his head. "Perhaps you want me to do what I did the last time, quietly walk up to you and put a knife to your throat to make you remember something. Of course, it's fine if I don't use a knife this time. What do you want to use? I can satisfy you." The chief of the order suddenly shot out a strange blue light from his eyes. Master Pride said carelessly, "I know your spiritual power is stronger than the average person, but your body can't support it, can it? You want to live." "No, it's because I want to live," the Chief of Black Order suddenly said in a low voice. "That's why I want to change something." "For example?" Master Pride asked with a mocking expression. "A master-slave relationship." The Chief of Black Order's eyes shone with blue light. "I'm afraid of death, so I rarely use my power. But now that I'm about to die, how can I not use my power?" "Pride, kneel." Master Pride was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. This old man must have lost his mind before he died. However, his expression suddenly became extremely strange. His body was now kneeling on the ground. Master Pride was stunned for a moment, then shocked and angry. "What did you do to me? When I found you, I had already secretly planted a spiritual seed in you." The blue light in the eyes of the Black religious congregation's chief gradually faded. "All this time, the satisfaction I've shown you was merely to numb you. Unbeknownst to you, this seed has long been planted in your mind. Now, with just a thought, I can make your mind explode and turn you into an idiot. You dare?" Master Pride gritted his teeth and said, "If you want to destroy my spirit, you'll have to pay with your life. In the past, I didn't dare. But now, I dare. I'm about to die, why wouldn't I dare?" The chief laughed maniacally. "If you dare to be stubborn with a dying man, then come. Let's perish together." Master Pride was silent. "Do what you should do. Pride, don't test my remaining patience before I die." Communication was shut down. Only then did Master Pride raise his head, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curved into a thin smile, and he said in a low voice, "Naive. It's just a little bit of spiritual power. If it's someone who hasn't explored the subworlds of Arcana civilizations, they'll probably fall for your trick, right?" At this moment, a slight vibration came. It was time to log in. "I'll play with you natives then." A hint of mockery flashed in Master Pride's eyes. He then walked out of the luxurious room. At the same time, in the control room, Captain Justin's seat suddenly sank. Then, through a long metal passage, he finally slid into a solemn room. There were 7 solemn-looking old men and middle-aged men in the room. Among them was the leader of the combat nuns, Katerina. Captain Justin looked around and said in a low voice, "The chief has given me full authority to command this operation. No one has it, right?" Everyone was silent. Captain Justin waved his hand. A screen rose from the conference table. It was a map of the town. A bright dot of light appeared on it. "The main target of this operation is Father Stella, then the capture of Lamias and the recovery of the holy relic of reversal," Captain Justin said quickly. Captain Justin quickly said, "The light spot on the map is the signal released by the inverse cross of fear armor carried by Sister Grant and the others on the last trip. Lamia's wouldn't not know how to remove the signal release. She might be planning to lure us to the location of the signal. With just a few pieces of the inverse cross of fear, it's impossible for her to fight against the religious order," a voice said. "She still has the God-slaying armor. It's more troublesome. I've already mentioned before that we can't arbitrarily give the God-slaying armor to Lamia's just because it has the highest compatibility. So, Katerina, shouldn't you take some responsibility for this matter?" Katerina was silent in front of her seat. There was no joy or anger on her face. Before daybreak, Captain Justin suddenly knocked on the table. "We must complete all the missions this time. This is the chief's order. So, everyone, please don't put unnecessary disputes in this meeting." "Humph," that person snorted. "The last time we sent Sister Grant and the others, it should have been easy to capture them, but they actually let Lamia's escape. Even the Nautilus sank. It's really difficult to feel at ease and continue to assign the mission of capturing Lamia's to Katerina." Katerina remained silent. Captain Justin frowned. "Karen Ching, so? That person," Karen said calmly, "I will be in charge of capturing Lamia's." Hearing this, Captain Justin looked at Katerina with an inquiring expression. "I have no objections." Katerina finally spoke at this time. "You're the commander of this operation. You decide." "All right then." Captain Justin nodded. "Then the matter of capturing Lamia's will be handed over to Karen. Next is Father Stella. Judging from the situation of Stella destroying the Nautilus, I'm afraid that at least 3 combat regiments will be needed to capture him. So this time, the combat nuns, the monster corps, and the hitman corps will move out together. The warship will provide the necessary firepower support." "Not enough," unexpectedly, Katerina suddenly said at this time. "If we want to deal with Stella, 3 combat regiments are not enough. I apply to use the remaining 2 highest-grade crystal armors of the Order, Calamity and Dawn." "Okay," Captain Justin said calmly. "I originally planned to use Calamity and Dawn. The chief's intention is to go all out and not leave any room for maneuver. Even if we have to flatten this town, we won't hesitate." They were all shocked. Even Katerina couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. If they didn't hesitate to flatten this town, wouldn't it be equivalent to giving the British Knight Organization a reason to directly start a war? The Knight Organization didn't care about the matters between the Black Order and the Holy Church, but this was equivalent to pushing the Knight Organization to the side of the Holy Church. "Everyone." At this time, the captain said in a deep voice, "Stella can become the best source of holy power. With the source of holy power, our 100-year plan will be completed. At that time, we will be fearless of all forces and power." The leaders of the Monster Corps and the Hitman Corps discussed the details of the operation with me. Katerina sighed. She already understood the chief's determination this time, and vaguely felt that the chief was afraid that he really couldn't wait. At this time, it showed that the chief was staking everything on this one throw. "Then I'll take my leave first." At this time, Karen also stood up and left his seat. Looking at the serious faces of Katerina and the others, he smiled and said, "Sorry, I didn't expect that I would choose a relatively easy mission. Then, I'll have to trouble you. I'll prepare champagne and wait for you to complete the mission and come back to celebrate." Katerina looked at Karen coldly. It was just a glance, and then she ignored him. Karen, who was about to walk out of the conference room, suddenly stopped. "By the way, capturing Lamia's is just to take back the holy relic of reversal and her Godslayer armor, right? In that case, if she resists to the death, it doesn't matter if she dies. Anyway, it's fine as long as we take back the things, right, Justin?" Katerina didn't seem to hear him, and was not affected at all. Captain Justin glanced at Katerina and thought for a while before saying, "Try to capture her alive. After all, she is a member of the religious order. Even if she is to be executed, she must be tried first. Of course, if the situation changes, you are allowed to make your own judgment." "How can I bear to kill her?" Karen smiled and said, "After all, Master Pride specifically asked for Lamia's. Of course, I'll order her." After saying that, Karen strode out of the conference room. At the same time, the huge submarine also completed its landing on the seabed. Naturally, such a huge submarine couldn't really get close to the shore. However, a large number of speedboats were shot out from the submarine. Then, they drew waves and rushed to the shore. Late at night, Paladin Wasco suddenly had an ominous feeling. He opened his eyes and walked out of the room. For some reason, the night sky outside the church gave Wasco a particularly dark feeling. At the same time, a glimmer in the night sky caught his attention. The moment he identified what these glimmers represented with the fastest speed, Wasco couldn't help but show a shocked expression. At the same time, Wasco also saw Stella. At this time, Stella was wearing loose pajamas and standing in the courtyard. Tom was in the priest's arms and seemed to want to struggle out, but Father Stella held him tightly. Tom seemed to be particularly irritable tonight. "Stella, what happened?" Wasco walked to Father Stella at once. "These souls, are they the residents of the town?" "More than that." Father Stella shook his head. "I counted, and there are probably students from those academies as well." "What's going on? Do you need to ask?" Father Stella turned back and looked at Wasco, who used to be the son of his coachman, with concern. "Looking at this situation, there must be a devil lurking here who wants to cause trouble in the dark. Damn it." Wasco immediately gritted his teeth and looked at the densely packed souls gathering in one direction, and in the next moment, rushed out of the church's door. There were many believers in this town. As a holy knight, it was his duty and responsibility to protect every believer of the Lord. He couldn't just watch these souls be taken away. However, the moment he stepped out of the church's door, a strong sense of dizziness hit Wasco, and he almost fell to the ground. His body had just recovered, and the exquisite and rich holy power was like a broken dam, wildly leaking out. Wasco was shocked, and quickly retreated into the church to stop the damage in time. "What happened outside?" Wasco's face was slightly pale. "I just walked out and I felt like my soul was being directly sucked away." "That's because your faith is not strong enough." Father Stella walked in front of Wasco and said seriously, "Come, I have a full set of amulets here, 100 for a set. I guarantee that you'll be fine." As he spoke, the priest tore open his pajamas. Both sides of his pajamas were densely packed with all sorts of strange amulets and other similar items. There were all kinds of belief systems. Wasco's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch, and he almost couldn't control himself to jump up and beat this heretic to death. He ignored Stella and directly jumped onto the church's roof, and at the same time tried to contact the few Holy Knight candidates who were temporarily staying in the town's apartment. Although the call went through, no one picked up. Wasco looked over and found that in the town, large numbers of souls were surging out, shrouded in death. Only the church was not affected. The town's population was not large, but if the students of the academy were included, there were at least 100,000 people. Faced with the fate of the town, Wasco could not help but feel anxious. That place, at this time, the souls seemed to be sucked into a whirlpool, spiraling in the night sky. Spiraling, they were finally sucked to the ground. It seemed to be a square in the center of the town. "Stella, your things are really useful?" Wasco lowered his head and shouted. "Nonsense." Father Stella coldly snorted. "They're all drawn by me, of course they're useful. Give me a set." Wasco gritted his teeth, and without even waiting for Father Stella to respond, he jumped down, reached out and grabbed a handful of things from Stella's pajamas, and walked out of the church door resolutely. "It's really useful?" Wasco stared dumbfoundedly at the things he casually grabbed. It was a self-portrait drawn by Stella with his own soul style. Bastard Wasco! Don't think that you don't have to pay for taking my things just because you brought me and your sister together. The priest in the courtyard was now angry. If I don't beat the shit out of you tonight, I'll be sorry for the countless lives that died on your sister's body. Wasco was also angry and turned to leave. He really didn't have time to be crazy with Stella here. The signal from the reverse cross of fear is here, but on a wild grassland in the suburbs, a few cold-faced men dug out a black box from the mud. It seems that Lamia's buried it here of her own accord. Karen, the commander this time, sneered. She really thinks she's smart. Sir, how could Lamia's be so stupid to stay here and wait for us to appear? She threatened us with the secrets of the religious order and the holy relic of reversal. Karen sneered and said, she hoped that the religious order would imprison Master Pride and hand him over to her personally. Hearing this from Karen's mouth, the subordinates were all stunned. Is she crazy? Maybe she thought that after she got Stella, she would have the power to go against the religious order. Karen shook his head. Stupid woman. Let's go. It seems that if Lamia's is still in the town, she would definitely stay by Stella's side. At this moment, a subordinate came back. Sir, there's a manor up ahead. I saw Lamia's inside. Hashtag PS. 1280 seconds. Chapter 1628. Karen, who originally thought that this trip would be in vain, was slightly happy after hearing his subordinate's report. But he quickly thought of something that didn't make sense. You really saw Lamia's in the manor? His subordinate nodded with a serious expression. It is indeed her, and it shouldn't be an illusion, but what? Karen frowned subconsciously. His subordinate's hesitation at this moment seemed to be the same as what he felt in his heart. His subordinate thought for a moment and said, Lamia's was sitting on the balcony reading a book. She looked quite relaxed and didn't look nervous at all. It felt like she was deliberately telling us that she was there. And why did she deliberately bury a reverse cross of fear in this place? This place is not far from the manor, so I'm afraid it's a trap. Let's talk as we walk. Karen quickly made a decision in his heart. In fact, he could already vaguely see the faint light emitted by the manor at the end of the forest. Lamia's, it seems like she really betrayed us. Karen told his subordinate his thoughts. To be honest, from the last image transmitted by Nautilus, Father Stella, who could sink it with one blow, does indeed have shocking power. In front of this kind of power, Lamia's wavering is also something to be expected. Sir, what do you mean? Karen sneered. Don't forget what Lamia's initial purpose was. She hoped to increase her merit by capturing Stella, thus avoiding the fate of being sent to Master Pride. Obviously, she failed. Stella's power is beyond everyone's expectations. Lamia's can't just return like this, because her fate will be very tragic after she returns. At this time, if it was you, what would you do? His subordinate opened his mouth. Although he already knew what choice he would make, there were some words that could never be said directly. Looking at his subordinate's awkward expression, Karen smiled and said, She will join Stella, and then join the Holy Church. She used the holy relic of reversal as a threat, wanting the religious order to hand over Grandmaster Pride. She felt that by standing on Stella's side, she had the capital to fight against the religious order. She even believed that as long as she stayed by Stella's side, she could do whatever she wanted. It's a pity that Lamia's didn't expect that this time, the Cultivators Association would turn out in full force. Yes. The subordinate nodded in agreement. Maybe Lamia's threat is just a means to bluff, or maybe she is putting on an act for the Holy Church to show that she is determined to break with us. I think she really doesn't know what kind of revenge will come from this break. Lamia's, you think you are smart this time. Karen smiled and said, Come to think of it, there should be people from the Holy Church lying in ambush in that manner, right? Indeed, according to our usual practice, we would first eliminate the spies to inquire about it. But this time, it's completely out of everyone's expectations. Even I didn't know beforehand that the chief would give the order to turn out in full force. My lord, we can see the manor clearly now. Another subordinate quickly walked back at this time. A light flashed in Karen's eyes, and he said sarcastically, I don't know how many people from the Holy Church Lamias has roped in, but according to the intelligence, this time the Holy Church did exclude one paladin Wasco and several paladin trainees. It's very likely that this paladin and his students are living in this manor at this time. Listening to his superior's clear and logical analysis, the subordinate couldn't think of anything wrong at this time, but he still felt that something was wrong. However, if Paladin Wasco and his students were in the manor, it was indeed quite troublesome. After all, although Wasco was old, his combat strength didn't show any signs of weakening. In the Black Order, he could be said to be at the top of the hunting list. At this time, the only problem that the Black Order was afraid of was the Descended Angel. The Descended Angel definitely didn't exist in this town. Otherwise, with the strength of the Descended Angel, how could it let the Black Order's submarine get close? Perhaps before the Black Order's combat force could land, they would have already been attacked by the Descended Angel when they were still at sea. Therefore, Karen was very confident at this time. No matter how strong Wasco is, he is still only one person now. Karen said indifferently, and we are the 4 major regiments of the Black Order. Are we afraid of a paladin's combat strength? The subordinate shook his head. It wasn't that they hadn't fought with a paladin before. They already had a direct understanding of the paladin's combat strength. Although the Black Order's strongholds in Euroland were destroyed by the Descended Angel overnight, most of those strongholds were used to set up a diversion to confuse the Holy Church's spies. The real elites of the Black Order had always been entrenched in the powerful human country on the other side of the ocean. As long as they could complete the plan this time and complete the things that they had prepared for 100 years, the Black Order would have the combat strength to defeat the angels. By then, they would naturally have nothing to fear. At this time, a subordinate brought Karen a night vision goggles. Karen raised the night vision goggles and looked directly into the manor. This manor was actually small, so under the guidance of his subordinate, Karen quickly saw Lamia's reading under the moonlight on the balcony. She is in a good mood. Karen sneered. I don't know if she can still smile later. Give her a surprise, Carbon. Carbon. Karen's trusted subordinate nodded at this time. The regiments under Karen's command were called New Human Independent Combat Division. They were a group of machine-like warriors who used drugs and methods of modification to open up the limits of the human body, allowing humans to evolve as a species. New Human Independent Combat Division was also the only one among all the regiments in the Black Order that were fully equipped with armor. If the higher-ups of the Night Organization were here, they would probably think that this New Human Independent Combat Division was similar to the Fenia Warrior Regiment, that the late British Prime Minister spent a lot of money and resources to create. It was just that compared to the Dragon Knight armor, created by the late Prime Minister, the New Human Independent Combat Division's armor seemed to be a lot more powerful. Carbon waved his hand at this time, and 20 warriors wearing the Blazing Meteor armor that was far more powerful than the Dragon Knight armor stepped out. It was based on one of the 3 crystallization of the Black Order, or disaster. The Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was controlled by a total of 99 powerful Homo Evolutus. As the leader of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division, Karen was one of the first batch of experimental subjects ever since the Black Religious Order had mastered the human body modification technology. Karen's modification progress was much faster than the members of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division. Karen himself also had an exclusive high-grade combat armor. In terms of performance, it was only below the 3 highest-grade combat armors. Using such a powerful configuration to capture Lamia's was like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Since Wasco might be hiding in the manor, then let's give this holy night a surprise. Karen's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. The Black Order has been dormant for 100 years. It's time to let the Holy Church, let the world see our strength. As the saying goes, no one knows what you've been through for 100 years, but once you become famous, you'll shock the world. This was the intention of the Black Order. Countless times, when they achieved breakthroughs in technology, they suppressed the ecstasy in their hearts. Time and time again, they surpassed the era, and time again, they kept a low profile, just so that one day, they could return to the world with an invincible attitude. High energy me family particle cannon ready. Aim. Fire! In an instant, 20 Homo evolutus wearing the blazing meteor battle armor, each of them carrying a large autocannon, under the command of Captain Cabin, they pulled the trigger of the autocannon. Terrifying energy instantly gathered in the barrels of the autocannons. Karen could even feel the blazing aura of this pure energy. A bloodthirsty look flashed in his eyes. It was as if he could already see the holy knight hiding in the manor rushing out from the explosion, covered in blood. He also saw the despair of the new human independent combat master. Torturing and killing a veteran holy knight of the Holy Church was also a very interesting thing. Finally, 20 powerful beams of light instantly shot out. It's coming! Karen's pupils instantly widened, and his breathing became faster. The pleasure brought by the destruction instantly filled his brain, and his adrenaline surged. At this moment, a figure silently appeared at the Yuhua stone steps in front of the manor, and it quickly reached out its right palm. Eve. The moment Eve's right palm reached out, the center of its palm cracked open, revealing a round hole the size of a ping-pong ball. The 20 powerful beams of light strangely curved at this moment. The beams of light that were supposed to shoot out in parallel were now distorted, and because of the distortion, they started to converge. It was as if there was something attracting them. The 20 beams of light were completely swallowed by something in the end. They were directly swallowed by the round hole in Eve's palm. After swallowing the 20 beams of light, Eve's body seemed to be covered by a layer of light. Even its hair was slightly scattered, and countless stars were hanging in the air. The destruction that was supposed to happen didn't happen, and the huge explosion and shockwave that was supposed to happen didn't happen either. In the new Human Independent Combat Division formation, Karen, who was being protected by several warriors, opened his eyes wide. What did he see? Did someone just block the barrage of 20 high-energy particle cannons of the Me family with their bare hands? A strange silence appeared in the new Human Independent Combat Division formation. Each of them had the ability to see things from afar, which meant that each of them clearly saw what happened just now. This woman isn't a human. At least her arm looks like some kind of machine. Karen shivered. The uneasy feeling that he had when he was discussing with Karen instantly turned into a bad feeling, and he felt a chill down his spine. The Holy Church also has the technology to modify weapons? Doubts flashed through Karen's mind, and then he said, "It's not Wasco. Where did this woman come from?" However, Karen wasn't very afraid. The new Human Independent Combat Division had 99 warriors, and this time, they were all heavily armored. At this moment, Eve suddenly jumped up in front of the manor. Like a cannonball, it rushed into the night sky at a terrifying speed and then fell down. Boom! The moment Eve landed, the ground instantly cracked, and the cracks spread out, covering the entire formation of the new Human Independent Combat Division. The cracking of the ground didn't make the new Human Independent Combat Division panic. This kind of sudden change in the terrain could be avoided with a simple jump. Only the speed and the power of the woman's fall were shocking. After landing on the ground, Eva crossed her hands in front of her chest and then waved them to the sides. Then, something seemed to extend from Eve's palms and finally converge to form two sharp blades. The creator's private property is under attack. Executing automatic defense program. Eve's pupils flashed with purple light, and like a camera lens, her pupils contracted and expanded. Annihilate. What does she want to do? One of the new human independent combat division warriors turned on the communication device and said subconsciously. His voice wasn't loud, but it was connected to the network, so the whole group could hear it at the same time. They heard his final scream. In the air, the warrior who just sent out the communication device was cut open after his scream. He didn't even have a chance to resist. Attack! 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 Karen, who had recovered from his momentary panic, shuddered violently as he shouted with a hoarse voice. Boom! Just as Karen gave the order to attack, a heat wave surged from his side. Shockingly, after a warrior was slain, his blazing meteor battle armor had been blasted apart. Orange flames appeared in the air, and along with the thunderous explosion and hot air, sparks flew everywhere. Boom! 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 It was like a person who was lost in absolute darkness and encountered an assassin in the darkness. Karen shivered as he listened to the continuous explosions. His scalp was numb, his heart was beating violently, his hands and feet were cold, and he had difficulty breathing. In the night sky there was a beautiful figure, as if dancing with the fireworks. I'll die. The unprecedented fear made Karen forget all the advantages of the new human independent combat division. He stumbled back and almost fell down. Then, he put on his armor that was said to be only below the 3 crystallization of the Shura Society. Karen turned around and stood up like a dog. Then, the propulsion device on the back of the armor ignited, and 2 dark blue flame tails pierced through the sky. Less than half of the new human independent combat division warriors were left, and less than a minute had passed. Like fireworks, it was extremely short. ######PS. The next chapter will be delayed. Chapter 1629. The blue battle armor had a streamlined outer shell, and its speed was close to 1 times the speed of sound. The roaring sound was extremely loud, making the quiet night unpeaceful. Sharon had no intention of turning back. The sense of crisis made his heart feel like it was being squeezed tightly and could be crushed at any moment. Even with the protection of the battle armor, his body was still cold. How should he report to Justin, report to the chief that this operation has failed? Tell them that this operation has failed, and that the battle armor division that we have spent decades to develop has just given the enemy a grand fireworks show. Then proudly say, "Yes, only I escaped, haha." Could it be that the woman is also an angel from the Holy Church? But Sharon quickly rejected this idea. The Black Order had a special method to detect holy power, and the woman who annihilated the battle group obviously didn't have holy power. "Sharon, this is the control room. I am Justin. Please report your current situation. Why is the signal of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division almost gone?" At this moment, the voice of Captain Justin from the submarine control room sounded in his ears. Sharon opened his mouth, but the words that were about to come out from his throat were suddenly blocked by something. He looked at the internal display in the battle armor in a daze, but there was nothing behind him. "Sharon, please report your current situation. I repeat, please report your mother's situation immediately." The Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was wiped out. Sharon gritted his teeth and said bitterly, "We found Lamia's, but at the same time we encountered a terrifying woman. She was the one who wiped out the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division." Perhaps when he activated the battle armor's thrusters, half of the soldiers of the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division were still alive, but at this time, Sharon couldn't contact any of the soldiers in the battle group, including his most trusted subordinate, the leader of the battle group, Cap'n. In just a few minutes, the Homo Evolutus Independent Combat Division was wiped out. This made Sharon almost unable to accept this fact. If it wasn't for the fact that the battle armor could only be controlled automatically, he would have fainted and fallen to the ground. "What did you say?" Captain Justin's shocked voice came from the communicator. "Image, this is the image from just now. I'll send it back now." Karen's voice was hoarse as he took a deep breath. "I won't come back alone. From now on, I will activate the real-time battle feed." Turning around, facing that terrifying place again. Facing the direction of that terrifying woman, Karen's eyes were filled with determination. Now that he had fled back, his fate could be imagined. He wouldn't go back with the name of a deserter and a coward. He could only face that terrifying woman again, even if it meant dying in battle. The thrusters were activated once again, and a huge burst of energy was about to erupt. But at this moment, Karen suddenly lost consciousness. Without his command, the armor strangely stopped in the night sky, motionless. The AI program inside the armor was now checking the situation of the controller. The conclusion was that the life signs of the user of the armor, Karen, had disappeared, and this set of data was immediately transmitted back to the control room of the huge submarine in the distant ocean. That was when a large number of residents in the town began to die. At the same time, the other 3 battle regiments that were preparing to capture Father Stella also completed the landing under the command of Katerina. They would bypass the center of the town and reach the back of Father Stella's church from the edge. I wonder if Karen has completed the mission. Among the battle nuns, a woman who temporarily replaced Sister Grant and was in charge of leading the battle nuns couldn't help but whisper to Katerina at this time. "Send 2 people to follow me," Katerina suddenly said. "When Grant last communicated with me, she seemed to be in a nearby sea cave. Even if she's dead, I hope to find her body." "Right away." The temporary leader nodded, then hesitated and said, "But what about the command of the operation?" "There's nothing to command." Katerina shook her head and said, 3 battle regiments with all their combat power. There are only 2 results. Either they capture Stella or they can't. It doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. I'll leave the command of the battle sisters to you for the time being." Soon, Katerina left with 2 battle sisters. The other 2 high-ranking members of the order, who were of the same rank as Katerina, just pretended that they didn't see Katerina leaving. They agreed with Katerina's words. 3 battle regiments were dispatched to capture Stella alive. If even that failed, Katerina's presence or absence would not change the situation they would face if they failed. "Let's go." With the order, the large group was ready to go and moved quickly. But at this moment, the warriors who were walking in front suddenly stopped. Because a black cat was blocking in front of them at this moment. How could a cat stop so many powerful warriors? However, this cat was able to stand up and speak the human language. "We meet again, everyone." "We meet again?" Everyone was puzzled. Everyone immediately searched their memories, but they couldn't find any impression of this black cat that could talk. Of course, they wouldn't be afraid of a cat that could talk. As a member of the inhuman world, what strange things had they not seen before? But soon, the warriors in the front row of the 3 battle regiments fell down one after another. Like dominoes, the scale and speed of the fall was so fast that they didn't even have time to react in fear. Do you know, death is just like this? In less than a breath's time, no matter how bright the light was in your previous life, the moment it extinguishes, it will usher in the same kind of darkness. The black cat's voice lingered in the ears of those who were at the back of the group. It was the whisper of death. "I hope this is the last time." There was also the sound of sighs. The black cat turned around and left. Just as it crossed the beach road, they fell down in large numbers. There was no pain, no howling, as if they were just sleeping. Then, they became cold corpses that gradually cooled down. In the manor, in the guest room near the forest, on the balcony, when the firelight kept shining on Lamia's face, she couldn't hear any sound. The manor was still so quiet. She could even hear the sound of insects on the grass downstairs. The slaughter in the distance was like a silent film. Is this Eve? Lamias held the binoculars in one hand and clenched the railing on the balcony with the other hand. She leaned out and said, "It's actually a new human independent combat division. The battle." The one-sided slaughter stopped. Nobody knew when it stopped. Lamias froze on the balcony. Her hand that was holding the binoculars suddenly dropped down. At this time, Eve slowly walked back. The dual blades in its hands were gone. Except for a trace of dust on its clothes, there was nothing strange about it. Looking at Eve, who was just downstairs, Lamias was startled. She subconsciously stepped back and bumped into the table on the balcony, knocking over the glass on the table. The sound of the glass breaking rang out clearly. Lamias suddenly became a little flustered. It was as if she had done something wrong by breaking the peace of the manor by knocking over the glass. She squatted down and quickly reached out to pick up the glass shards. But at this time, Eve's voice suddenly rang out. Lamias suddenly looked up. Eve was in front of her on the balcony, expressionless. Its cold voice rang in Lamias's ears. "Miss Lamias, I'll clean up these things. So, if there's nothing else, maybe you can go to bed early. It's late, so I hope you won't make any noise. It will affect the master's daily routine. Good night." How loud could the sound of a glass falling to the ground be? Could it be compared to the explosion of the blazing meteor? But that was a silent battle. At least, the manor had maintained an abnormal silence from the beginning to the end. The loudest sound was probably the sound of the glass breaking just now. "I will." Lamias took a deep breath. She immediately turned around and walked quickly to the bed. Then, she pulled up the blanket and covered her head. During the whole process, she didn't even dare to look back at Eve. She was frantically calculating the equation in her mind. Eve easily slaughtered the new human independent combat division, and the whole process definitely didn't take more than 3 minutes. Even when the god-slaying armor was still around, Lamias knew that she could only rely on the terrain to fight the new human independent combat division, one by one. She didn't want to be like Eve, who slaughtered the new human independent combat division. The manor owner, Luaccio, was Eve's master. According to what Eve said before, she was completely willing to submit herself to the manor owner, Luaccio. The manor owner easily suppressed the paladin, Wasco. He promised that as long as she was in the vicinity of this town, she wouldn't die. So, how powerful could this manor owner, Luaccio, be? There was nothing that could be used as a reference. There was nothing at all. Lamias couldn't figure out the equation in her mind. "Wait!" Lamias suddenly quivered. "How could such a terrifying guy protect me just because he asked me to do something?" The manor owner, Luaccio, didn't even have the slightest interest in the reverse holy relic that she had. Back then, he promised to hold back the paladin, Wasco, only because she had used the composition alchemy. So, what else could she do to make him feel that it was reasonable for him to protect her? Lamias suddenly sat up, stewed. However, Eve was no longer on the balcony, and the glass fragments on the floor had been cleaned up. There was even a new glass placed on the table on the balcony. Lamias subconsciously swallowed her saliva, only feeling that she was in an unprecedented mysterious place. The huge mystery that seemed to be impossible to uncover was the source of her fear. "Forget it. Do I still have room to resist?" Lamias let out a long sigh and looked at the night sky outside the balcony with mixed feelings. But at that moment she saw a figure standing on the balcony. "Luaccio, it's you." Lamias was shocked. She hurriedly lifted the blanket and quickly walked out of bed. "Didn't Eve say that you were resting? The one-sided massacre just now didn't make any noise in the manor." She asked herself, if she had fallen asleep before the massacre, she probably wouldn't have been affected at all. "I was reading for a while. Actually, I was about to fall asleep." Boss Luo smiled casually. "Then," he suddenly said, "those people just now were here to take you back, right?" "Yes." Lamias didn't have the slightest intention of hiding anything. At that moment she was as obedient as a tamed cat. "Thank you, you purposely led them here, right?" Boss Luo said again. "I." Lamia's opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. Her heart was beating even faster. All the strength in her body seemed to have been drained. Even her teeth were slightly chattering. "It's okay." Boss Luo smiled and said, "Since I promised to protect you during this time, then no matter what happens during this time, it will be within the scope of protection. You don't blame me?" Lamia's was shocked. She looked up in confusion and subconsciously asked, "Why?" She even forgot about her fear. There was only one question in her heart. "I said, I will ask you to do one thing." What can I do for you?" Lamia said self-deprecatingly, "Or rather, with your strength, what would you need a mortal like me to do? You can't be greedy for my body, right? I can't be compared to the woman beside you." "Because you are a mortal," Boss Luo said seriously. "As a mortal, you are weak enough. Therefore, with my current ability, I can do something. I plan to send you to a place and then do one thing." "You?" Lamia's couldn't help but frown. "I don't understand. Your maid can annihilate a powerful battle force of the religious order in a few minutes. In this world, is there anything you can't do? Why do you need a mortal like me?" Luocho didn't say anything. He just silently looked at Lamia's. Lamia's opened her mouth and finally sighed. She nodded and said, "Okay, I actually don't have a choice. Tell me, where do you want to send me and what do you want me to do for you?" "I will send you back to the past." "What?" "Please help me find someone." At the same time, a huge light pillar shot directly to the sky from the center of the town. The light pillar was so bright that Lamia's couldn't open her eyes. After a while, Lamia's felt that she could open her eyes. The moment she slowly opened her eyes, she was so shocked by the scene in front of her that her mind almost went blank. The sky seemed to have been dyed blood red by something. On the ground, blood flowed like a river. Brave warriors were fighting on the battlefield tirelessly. There were human warriors, stone giants, huge beasts, and even giant snakes that spat out lava. Lightning flashed in the sky, and huge waves rose from the sea in the distance. It was as if magma had emerged from hell and was flowing on the earth. "What is this place?" Lamia's was so frightened by the scene in front of her that she sat down on the ground. Suddenly, a voice like the might of the heavens sounded from the sky. "Hades, do you really want to start this war and destroy the entire kingdom of God?" "Ha! Hades! #######PS. 1380 seconds. Chapter 1630. When a huge burning fireball, as tall as a person, suddenly fell from the sky and made the ground explode, Lamia's consideration was no longer about whether everything in front of her was real or not. She didn't even think about what Boss Luo wanted her to do. What she should think about was how to save her own life. Because this terrible fireball was just an appetizer on the table. The real feast was still to come. Hundreds and thousands of enormous fireballs rained down like a meteor shower, wildly smashing down on the ground. Countless warriors and monsters who were fighting on the ground were killed or injured by this terrifying barrage of fireballs. God's war. The oncoming heat wave, the sound of battle that seemed to be able to make the soul tremble, and the roar of the gods who controlled the great power of heaven and earth. Lamia's face was pale. She turned around and ran. This was probably the fastest sprint she had ever done in her life. She felt that all of the potential in her body had been suppressed to the point that there wasn't a single bit left. Her normal human body had forcibly run within 900 meters of the uneven wasteland. The ultra-high-intensity load made Lamia's heart like an engine that was about to explode. Her consciousness was almost blank, and she felt an unprecedented fear of the danger at this time. There was no free lunch in the world. The manor owner could protect her without caring about the cost. He even knew that she would attract the Black Order, but he didn't care. He just asked her to do one thing. But this matter was obviously going to kill her at any time. In such a terrible battlefield, not to mention completing the task that Boss Luo asked her to do, saving her own life was already a difficult task that was beyond the difficulty of hell. In the end, she still couldn't outrun those huge fireballs falling from the sky. When a big fireball fell behind her and then exploded, the huge airwave directly blew her body into the air and then threw her into a distant trench. At the moment, Lamia's consciousness was directly closed because of the shock of the impact. She fell to the ground and crawled. She directly fainted. She had lost consciousness, and her body was pressed against the corpse of a cyclops in the trench. But this terrifying war did not end because of her unconsciousness. This place was still the same as before. The boiling water was obviously not affected by a single drop of seawater. The sky was still burning. This war will continue until the end of time. Victory will belong to us gods. Hades, your scheme will eventually be crushed. That grand and imposing voice once again resounded in the sky, accompanied by lightning and thunder. It was an unparalleled heavenly might. In the darkness at the end of the earth, a cold voice that was not the slightest bit weak rang out. Then let's fight to the end, Zeus. The ground suddenly began to burn. Hurry up, there are still injured people here. I need food, clean water, and most importantly, medicine to stop the bleeding. Warrior, wake up. Your life is not over yet. For the glory of the gods and the survival of mankind, I command you to stand on the earth again, even if you only have one leg left. Help me! Help me! Help me! Light and shadow were like shuttles. She opened her eyes slightly and saw many shadows passing by in an instant. Lamia's only felt a buzzing sound in her ears, and a nauseating and dizzy feeling made her want to vomit. She struggled to prop herself up, but found that she was currently in a simple shed. There were more than a dozen seriously injured soldiers with her. Some of them were female warriors. The shocking wounds on their bodies made Lamia's have an impulse to close her eyes again, hoping to wake herself up in a dream. And there were at least 50 or 60 simple sheds like the one she was in. The sky was gray, and she could vaguely hear the sound of fighting in the distance. Lamia's knew that she was still in the terrible battlefield of the gods. This was probably a camp for the wounded at the rear, but she did not know which side it belonged to. Hades? The war of the gods? Zeus? In an instant, the voice that she heard before she fainted rang in Lamia's mind again, giving her a splitting headache. She dug out the names and the stories behind these names from her past memory. There were many myths of the ancient Greek kingdom of God in the modern world, and there were even a large number of scholars who were responsible for studying these myths. The Black Order had always been committed to overthrowing the Holy Church, so they had been sparing no effort to find useful power from various myths. But there has never been a record of a war of the gods in the modern world. Lamia's rubbed her swollen head and said to herself, even the official story of the fall of the Lord of the Sky and the death of the Lord of the Sky has never appeared. I have no idea what the final outcome of this war will be. If he did not use some kind of illusion magic on me, then he really sent me back to the distant past in this war of the gods. Lamia's suddenly quivered. Is he a god or a human? Sending a person back to the past was something that was completely beyond the scope of conventional understanding. Not to mention that Lamia's was just a human being, even if it was a master magician, even if it was the strongest cleric in the Holy Church, those powerful inhuman beings that Lamia's knew might not be able to understand it. I hope you can help me find a person. Luacio's voice suddenly appeared in her heart. Lamia's originally chaotic mind suddenly seemed to be sorted out and gradually became clear. That was the information she received when she traveled through time and space and came to this battlefield of the god. As long as I can find that person, I can go back to the original time. She stood up abruptly. What is this place? After learning the way to return, Lamia's asked anxiously, almost without thinking. She instantly grabbed a female warrior, who had just woken up from the pain with her arm broken off and bleeding from the wound. The female warrior endured the pain and said subconsciously, "This is the Perseus constellation, the camp of the hero Perseus. Don't you know? Why are you dressed differently from us? Are you from the king of hell's camp? Perseus? Perseus constellation? So, this should be the formation of the gods of Mount Olympus?" Lamia's lips moved slightly as she judged her current situation as quickly as possible. Before the female warrior was about to shout, she knocked her unconscious again. She took off the female warrior's armor and put it on herself. At the same time, she wiped the blood from the female warrior's wound with her fingers and smeared it on her bare skin. After picking up a broken sword and an uneven shield from the ground, Lamias lowered her head and hurriedly walked out of the camp of the wounded. She had nothing on her when she traveled through time and space this time. Even the holy relic of reversal that she had always carried with her was no longer with her. The holy relic of reversal was definitely not lost when she was unconscious. She did not bring it back at all. The moment she arrived here, Lamias had already checked her body. In other words, at this time, in order to complete Boss Luo's request, she started with a blank slate. She almost turned into a crate. But how can I find that person? Lamias, who had already walked out of the camp of the wounded and planned to retreat to the rear of the battlefield for a while, could not help but feel at a loss. At this moment, a heavy palm patted Lamias on the shoulder and asked in a deep voice, "Where are you going?" "This is not the direction to the battlefield." It was a blood-stained war general. Lamias turned around and looked at the nearly 2-meter-tall figure, the terrifying blood-stained armor on his body, and the murderous look on the war general's face. She instantly gave up the idea of passing the sword to him. "You want to escape, woman?" The war general lowered his head and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Lamias shook her head calmly. "Even on the battlefield, can't a woman be allowed to solve some physiological problems?" The warlord snorted coldly and slapped Lamias's face without saying a word. The force of the slap sent Lamias flying. She saw stars and vomited blood. She lay on the ground and struggled a few times before she staggered up. However, the war general instantly grabbed her hair and violently pulled her forward. "Wait, what are you trying to do? Let go of me! Let go of me! Shut up, woman!" The war general turned around and punched Lamias in the abdomen. The power of the punch in the abdomen was very strong. Lamias felt as though her internal organs were all mixed together and her body went limp. However, the war general continued to pull her hair and drag her forward. In the modern world, a huge light beam shot out from the center of the town. Its brilliance was enough to render a large area of suburban land outside the city. In the manor, Boss Luo was still standing on the balcony of Lamias's room, silently watching the light beam that was born in front of him. He was holding the reverse holy relic necklace in his hand. This necklace fell to the ground directly after Lamias disappeared. "It seems that I can't take advantage of this loophole," Luocha whispered to himself. He could imagine how difficult it would be for Lamias, who had no power, to be in that place. Strictly speaking, what he hoped Lamias could do was equal to creating a miracle. "Master!" Miss Servant Girl's voice came from behind. Miss Servant Girl walked over slowly and glanced at Lamias's room in confusion. Just a moment ago, Boss Luo left directly in front of her eyes, seemingly in a hurry. "Where's Lamias?" Yi asked softly at this time. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "I asked her to do something for me as a reward for protecting her." Miss Servant Girl glanced at the reverse holy relic in her master's hand again. She stroked her hair and suddenly said, "How difficult is it?" Boss Luo shook his head, then thought for a while and said, "When she comes back, I will make some adjustments to her protection depending on whether she completes it or not." Miss Servant Girl nodded. Boss Luo said, "If she meets my expectations, then help her to completely solve the problem of the Black Order." "Okay." Miss Servant Girl still nodded. Solving the problem of the Black Order would not be difficult for Miss Servant Girl. Only the so-called, completely mentioned by Boss Luo was something that Miss Servant Girl would take the time to consider. Luocio suddenly smiled at this time and stretched out his hand. Miss Servant Girl understood and stepped forward, naturally placing her palm in her master's palm. Luocio looked at the light column in front of him and said, "I probably can't sleep tonight, let's go for a walk." On the sea, in the control room of the huge submarine, there was dead silence at this time. Beside the beach road, a large number of fallen figures appeared on the screen of the control room at this time. Shock, anger, and fear flashed in Captain Justin's eyes. He only felt a chill go straight to his brain. 3 of the most powerful battle groups of the black religious congregation had died just like that. Those people didn't even have time to send back a single word of what had happened. The scene on the screen was even captured by the detector deployed by the submarine. What on earth happened? Captain Justin slumped on his chair powerlessly. The communication device he carried in his ear was actually connected to the chief of the Black Order. But at this time, Captain Justin could only hear the increasingly heavy breathing of the old chief. The silence of the chief made Captain Justin feel like he was sitting on pins and needles at this time. Until, on the screen, a huge light column appeared. The light instantly filled everything in the control room and reflected on the faces of every crew member. Captain Justin suddenly quivered and couldn't help but ask bitterly, "Chief, what do we do now?" At this time, the picture suddenly changed. On the screen, the horrifying ugly face of Master Pride appeared. Captain Justin looked at this ugly face that was becoming more and more disgusting with mixed feelings, his eyebrows knitted together. But before he had time to speak, Master Pride's eyes suddenly shot out a fanatical look and said excitedly, "Found it. It's enough for me to activate the final source of energy that I've refined. Do you see that light column? It's so wonderful, I can feel the enormous energy it's emitting. If I'm not wrong, it should be a vision that gathers a large amount of souls and life force. Seize it. Seize it. You must seize it. We can't get close at all," Captain Justin said furiously. "Anyone who gets close will die in an instant. That's your problem. I only want it." Master Pride snorted at this time and directly turned off the communication device. "How dare you!" Captain Justin immediately smashed the electronic dashboard on the armrest beside him with a punch. "Justin!" At this time, the chief of the order, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Activate the combat soldier in warehouse number 01. Captain Justin was stunned and said subconsciously, "But, we don't have enough people to operate it now." "It's okay," the chief said slowly. "This time, I'll personally control the combat soldier. It'll be more compact if I control it alone than if there are more people controlling it. Just do as I say." "Understood." Captain Justin clenched his teeth and quickly reached out to press a button on the control panel in front of him. In the depths of the submarine, in a secret and dark warehouse, hundreds of faint green lights suddenly lit up. They were like pairs of icy green eyes staring at each other. What a rich life force and soul force! Master Pride was standing on the deck of the submarine after it emerged from the water. He looked at the light column in the town in the distance with a surprised expression on his face. He said with a light smile, "With it, my injuries should be able to recover a lot. This is good stuff." But at this time, a man's voice slowly came, which almost made Master Pride's heart jump out of his chest. "Are you that Mr. Visitor from outer space who brought the composition alchemy?" Master Pride suddenly turned his bloated body and saw that behind him, a man and a woman had appeared without him knowing. They came hand in hand. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS. It's late, it's late. I ate some wine for dinner and then fell asleep. I only woke up when it was almost 10:30. I'm still under the bed. Chapter 1631. On the deck, the salty sea breeze blew, and Master Pride's eyes, one big and one small, narrowed at the same time. Someone, not just one, but two, approached him at the same time and appeared behind him without him noticing at all. This caused Master Pride to feel a chill run down his spine. At the same time, it also made him realize that after he fell into this subworld, the suppression of the subworld's will was too severe. But very quickly, the unhappiness of being suppressed by the subworld was swept away by the beauty in front of his eyes. Without a doubt, Master Pride was the most extravagant and lascivious type. His greed for pleasure was almost the only motivation that drove him to reach the pinnacle of the subworld he came from, and it was also the only motivation. Possessing an endless desire, and being willing to do anything to achieve the desire in his heart, meant that this person was willing to put in an unimaginable amount of effort. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Master Pride's mouth cracked open, and his ugly cheeks trembled a few times. Who would have thought that this bastard Charles was hiding such a top-notch product, and yet he didn't give it to me to enjoy? The eyes of Master Pride, who came from another world, were shining. Because of the lust in his heart, he couldn't hold back his saliva, and it even seeped out of his lips. But under his gaze, driven by lust, one could vaguely see a hint of coldness. Driven by lust, but not enslaved by it. He even turned his endless lust into motivation. This was the terrifying part of Master Pride. Once upon a time, countless opponents thought that lust was Master Pride's only weakness. More often than not, besides giving away the women that Master Pride played with, they also gave away their own lives. Charles? The young man holding the blonde woman's hand on the deck thought for a moment and said, "That's the name of the chief of the Black Order, isn't it?" Master Pride was all smiles as he said, "That's right. Useless Charles, dying Charles. These are all names I like to call him. So you're not Charles's men? Why are you on this submarine?" The young man, Boss Luo, calmly replied, "Currently, we're here for you, sir." "Me?" Master Pride couldn't help but laugh. "No matter what you've come to beg me for, I'll agree to it." "Young man, I like your sincerity." "Agree?" Luocio mulled over the meaning of this sentence. Master Pride said arrogantly, "I don't know where you found out about me, but I think you're the same as Charles from the Black Order. You want to learn how to use alchemy from me? This is an ability that only I can give you in this world. For the sake of the gift you gave me, I promise you, greedy young man, I can feel that you and I are the same type of person. From your eyes, I can see a different kind of desire, a desire to possess the things you like." Gift. Boss Luo was startled at first, and then he looked at the servant girl thoughtfully. He understood the meaning behind Master Pride's words, and he couldn't help but shake his head. He then whispered in the servant girl's ear, "I thought something like this wouldn't happen to us." The servant girl smiled indifferently at first, and then she said indifferently, "After all, it's essentially a powerful soul that walks in the void, so it's more or less immune. Besides, Master has always restrained himself." Boss Luo opened his mouth. He didn't know what the previous store manager was like, but it was obvious that he was too low-key in the servant girl's words. "Is this the so-called product of alchemy in this world?" Master Pride's eyes shone again. "What a rare masterpiece. Although the technique used isn't that great, it can't withstand the perfection of the soul that drives this puppet. TSK, I've played with alchemy puppets before, but I've never seen one of this level. Greedy fellow, I'm more and more satisfied with your sincerity. This puppet is your work, right? Tell me, what do you want from me? Is it the technique of structural alchemy from another world? If you have more perfect puppets like this, I can consider recruiting you as my apprentice. Don't think that being my apprentice is a shameful thing. You may not know, but in my original world, how many people were as humble as insects in order to become my apprentice? Although it's a powerful soul that can walk in the void, in terms of ugliness, it's even more ugly than Asmodeus." The servant girl said expressionlessly, "Perhaps you were born in the world of all mythical civilizations. Compared to Asmodeus, you'll be more suitable for the crime of pervert." "Asmodeus?" Master Pride subconsciously furrowed his brows. He felt like he had heard this name somewhere before. But in the crevice of the dimension, time didn't count, and he couldn't feel the passage of time. Only memories were growing. In the vast sea of memories, Master Pride vaguely felt that he should have heard of the name Asmodeus before, maybe in a subworld that he had explored before. Of course, he could recall it, but that would require him to reorganize his memories, which was really troublesome. The servant girl didn't say anything. She just put on a pair of white stockings on her clean and dust-free hand. But Boss Luo suddenly waved his hand and shook his head. The servant girl glanced at her master in surprise. Luochu said indifferently, "I haven't felt this way for a long time. My mood is slightly different from the ups and downs in the past. The last time I felt this way was when I was in front of my father's grave." "Master?" The servant girl couldn't help but be surprised. "Do you know what this means?" Boss Luo said in a low voice. "This means your position in my heart is much more important than I thought. I can also be angry." Angry. This was the first time Yu Yi heard such words from her master. She had never heard Luochu say such words. While her heart trembled, something seemed to break out of the ground, trying to break through the shackles under her rational soil. "You stand there." Luochu waved his hand. The servant girl's face softened instantly. She quietly retreated behind Boss Luo and looked at her master's figure. Master Pride suddenly felt that something was wrong. He didn't know when the sea breeze had stopped, and even the waves on the sea had stopped as well. The immutable seawater seemed to have solidified in an instant. The cold glint in Master Pride's eyes that was hidden in the endless depths of the sea suddenly erupted. He put his palms together. The circle representing structural alchemy appeared on the back of his palms at the same time. Two blue and white electric arcs shot out from his palms and hit the submarine's deck. In the blink of an eye, the metal deck of the submarine began to change. Two gigantic metal skulls quickly emerged from the metal deck on either side of Master Pride. Just the exposed metal head was already as tall as a human. If it was completed, it would probably be a huge metal puppet. It was a pity that the will of the submerged world suppressed it too much. Otherwise, Master Pride would be able to create hundreds of similar metal dolls in a short period of time. At his peak, Pride controlled no less than 1,000 huge metal dolls and swept through his submerged world. He single-handedly created an empire that lasted for hundreds of years. "Don't take out this kind of toy." Luochu waved his hand casually at this moment. The heads of the two huge metal dolls sank into the metal deck of the submarine in an instant. When the refining process was reversed in an instant, Master Pride's clasped hands were like magnets of the same pole, and they automatically bounced off in an instant. The circle of truth representing structural alchemy on the back of his palms started to burn. The circle of truth that he had painstakingly obtained started to collapse on a large scale at this moment. This feeling was so painful that Master Pride couldn't help but wail in agony. The crazed chill in his eyes had already dimmed and was replaced by fear that he had never felt before in his life. You! Luochu walked over slowly at this moment. "I have something that I asked a young lady to do for me. As an additional reward for her if she can complete the task I entrusted to her, I intend to hand you over to her. Of course, if she can't complete the task I entrusted to her in the end, I intend to let you go because there is no direct conflict between you and me. The reason why I came to you in advance is because if that young lady can complete the task, I can give her the reward immediately. That's all. Don't come over." Master Pride couldn't help but retreat. He had already taken a few steps back before he could react. "That's what I thought." Boss Luo shook his head. "That's really what I thought. In fact, if that young lady can't complete the task I entrusted to her in the end, I'll even compensate you as an apology." Master Pride crashed into a hatch of the submarine behind him. He couldn't retreat anymore and sat down on the ground. There was a kind of great horror called this moment. You might think that because you fell here, You were suppressed by this world's araya and couldn't use your strength. That's why you were forced into this situation. That's why you feel resentful. Boss Luo had already walked in front of Master Pride and lowered his head to look at him. But I want to tell you that even if you're in the crevice of this dimension, facing me, you don't have any ability to resist. Surpasser. Surpasser? Master Pride's face was pale and his voice couldn't help but tremble. You're a surpasser who's reached the limit of power. Let me go, I didn't mean to offend you. That's the source of my power, the trait of my soul. I can't change it. But I've been very careful, I'm willing to submit to you. Really? Even if it's my soul, I'll still be willing to let you enslave me. Do you know why I said those words just now? Luoqiu shook his head. Even I was a bit surprised when I said those words. I shouldn't have said those words. Pride, do you know why this is? Why? Because of me. Boss Luo's gaze instantly became muddled. It seems like you're really angry. As he said that, under Master Pride's fearful gaze, Luoqiu reached out his hand and pointed his finger at Pride's forehead. Time will slow down for you. Perhaps a minute in the outside world will be thousands or even tens of thousands of years in your spiritual world. There will be an unprecedented reality waiting for you. Everything that you're afraid of, or the terror that you've brought to others, everything will be repeated on you. But your spirit won't collapse because of this. Your spirit won't be tempered and become stronger because of this. When you wake up, I'll still treat you as a reward and hand you over to that lady. His finger left. Master Pride slumped onto the ground. His eyes were empty and lifeless. He just sat there like a pile of rotten meat. After a while, Miss Maid slowly walked to Boss Luo's side. She said in a low voice, "What a pity! His soul is dimming little by little. A soul that can walk in the void is very valuable. The soul of a powerhouse is gone. Even if it's gone, it can still be nurtured." Boss Luo reached out and stroked Miss Maid's face. He said softly, "Only this beauty can't be blasphemed in front of me. Master is rarely like this." Miss Maid lowered her head and leaned on her master. Boss Luo shook his head. "It seems that like just now, it's really not suitable for me." "Not suitable?" Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. "But it made my heart beat faster." Right at this moment, Master Pride's body, his chest suddenly shone with a bright light, as if something was about to leave his body. Boss Luo and Miss Maid, who felt this strange movement, looked over at the same time. In their vision, this light didn't leave Master Pride's body. Instead, it came from Master Pride's soul, struggling to come out. The ball of light finally broke through Master Pride's body and floated on the deck, bathing in the night. Boss Luo sized it up and then fell into deep thought. At this moment, the ball of light bathed in the night and starlight changed little by little. Gradually, it transformed into a petite figure. Petite but exquisite. She wore a retro female long dress from an ancient European palace. "Miss Loya?" Miss Maid called out a name subconsciously. Boss Luo shook his head. This girl wasn't Loya. She was Araya. Perhaps she was Araya from Master Pride's original world. Chapter 1632. Boss Luo had seen a few Araya in different subworlds, but the one he was in contact with the most was naturally number 003 Araya in this subworld. Of course, if number 003 Araya had feelings, he wouldn't want to be summoned by Boss Luo. This client's daddy was too hard to please. That was probably it. Farewell. The girl who broke free from Master Pride's soul, wearing an ancient court dress, had lifeless eyes. She was obviously different from the other Araya that Boss Luo had met. Intuitively, the memory of this Araya seemed to have been damaged. So, it should be the embodiment of the world will of the subworld where Pride is? Miss Maid was now carefully sizing up the unknown number Araya in front of her, and was lost in thought. Boss Luo was also observing Miss Maid, and was also lost in thought. Yu Yi almost immediately thought that this unknown number Araya was Loya. However, after she realized that it was Araya in her consciousness, or even in her subconscious, the impression that Loya and Araya looked similar had been distinguished. She didn't associate Araya with Loya anymore. This was a sudden change for Boss Luo, but at the same time, it was also a change that Yu Yi didn't notice. "I've seen something similar." Miss Maid pulled back her hair that was blown away by the sea breeze and said, "Some powerful creatures that walk in the crevices of dimensions don't explore the subworlds gently. They use the simplest and most violent means to directly defeat the world will of the subworld. Obviously, powerful creatures that can walk in the crevices of dimensions can't directly defeat the world will of the subworld, which is Araya." "You mean, Pride defeated the world will of the subworld in his own subworld?" Boss Luo was lost in thought. Miss Maid shook her head. "It shouldn't be. Judging from the strength of Pride's soul, he doesn't have such ability. But if this girl is indeed the world will of his original subworld, then there's only one possibility. He eroded the origin of his own subworld." Boss Luo frowned. Miss Maid nodded. "Although I don't know what method he used, I'm afraid it's not a conventional method. It's very likely that it was accompanied by the blood of the entire civilization. Pride's desire is incomparably huge. A guy who can control such a desire is very vicious." Boss Luo shook his head and looked at the motionless girl in front of him. After she was swallowed, she was in a state where she couldn't be refined by Pride. Coincidentally, Pride was in his hands and fell into a world of fear. Therefore, the girl instinctively felt the opportunity and successfully broke free. If the world will of a subworld is plundered, then what about this subworld? Boss Luo asked curiously. Miss Maid said, "A new world will be born. Unless the entire subworld is completely wiped out, it will still be reborn if only the civilization is destroyed. In addition, the world will is actually a kind of super high standard currency." Currency? Boss Luo couldn't help but be startled. Nowadays, there were fewer and fewer things that could surprise him, and the things that really surprised him were things that really shocked him. Miss Maid nodded and then waved her hand. A thick account book appeared in her hand. She opened it and the pages rustled. Miss Maid read softly, "In the old days, the master of the heavenly court, also known as the Jade Emperor, used 9,999 sources of world will in exchange for a spiritual space that could evolve and grow. It was called the immortal world." Boss Luo's expression gradually became strange. "Immortal? Immortal world?" Miss Maid paused and glanced at her master. Then she turned to another page and said in a flat voice, "In the new days, the master of the heavenly kingdom used 4,000 sources of world will in exchange for the exclusive right to use the heavenly kingdom of God, and then he maintained the priority of using it in a way of leasing. In the old days, new days?" Luochu frowned subconsciously and said in a low voice, "Exclusive right to use?" Miss Maid explained, "Before other customers bid less than 4,000 sources of world will, the heavenly kingdom of God will become a commodity that can be supplied. It won't be actively shown to customers." Luochu nodded with some understanding. Then he asked in confusion, "Suppose I have more than 4,000 sources of world will, do I also need to exchange for the heavenly kingdom of God?" Miss Maid said indifferently, "Then we will take back the heavenly kingdom and terminate the transaction with the current master of the heavenly kingdom. Because this is not like the immortal world, which is a one-time transaction. Of course, we can also create another similar heavenly kingdom of God, but generally we don't mind creating it because we will lose the original profit. In the same way, if the customer has more than 9,999 sources of world will and wants the immortal world, we can also recycle or recreate it. Of course, because the immortal world is a one-time transaction, we can recycle it by discussing with the master of the immortal world about another transaction, or we can directly sell it. I suggest we sell it directly." Boss Luo, who felt that his world view had been refreshed again, rubbed his eyebrows. Boss Luo hadn't looked through the account book of the shop for a long time. At first, he thought that an account book might record all the transactions in a subworld at most. But obviously, he was wrong. The account book couldn't be finished, and it was boring. Boss Luo sighed in his heart, praising the maid for doing such a good job. He signaled Miss Maid to keep the account book. "Oh right," Miss Maid suddenly mentioned, "this kind of source of world will, other than being the highest standard currency for the shop, will also be circulated in the hands of the powerful beings in the dimensional void. For them, the source of world will is the highest standard currency, but only a few powerful beings have it. Under normal circumstances, it is very difficult for the powerful beings that have advanced to the dimensional crevice to have the means to harvest this kind of source of world will." Boss Luo nodded, looking at the walking gold coin box in front of him. Looking at Araya, who was in an unknown subworld, he couldn't help but think about how to deal with it. This Araya had escaped from Pride's hands, and was currently in the state of an ownerless object. Of course, it could also be said that it belonged to itself, but its current situation was that it had lost most of its memories, only some simple instincts, and couldn't even judge many things. It couldn't even make effective transactions. For the shop owner, any income outside of the transaction contract couldn't be used as an offering to the altar. While he was thinking about how to deal with it, a breeze blew gently, and on the deck, a blue-haired, blue-eyed girl in a long dress stood quietly. Intelligent multipurpose manager Araya, number 003. Before the girl finished her opening speech, Boss Luo had already waved his hand to stop the girl from introducing herself. Boss Luo stared into number 003 Araya's eyes. "You came for her, your sister?" Confirm, for some reason, looking at the current number 003 Araya, Luocho had a feeling that he saw something called pitiful in the other's eyes. Of course, this was probably just an illusion. Perhaps it was an illusion brought about by his habit of anthropomorphizing the altar all this time. Number 003 Araya's goal was very clear. It was indeed for this seriously damaged source of world will. Using number 003 Araya's words, all Araya were sub-managers born from a huge unimaginable special system, and then this sub-manager that was plundered by Pride was injured and needed to be repaired. If the repair was successful, in the endless dimensions, a new civilized world would be born. As one of the sub-managers, it had the obligation to rescue any source of world will that was damaged. Is the possibility of repairing it high? Luocho thought for a while and asked. Number 003 Araya directly said, "You can repair it by copying all my data, but after the repair, the civilization that it spawns will use the current civilization as a blueprint. I need a longer time to let the new civilization branch out. The most conservative estimate is that it will take 3 civilization processes." Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "If you don't retrieve it, will there be any impact?" Number 003 Araya said, "In theory, no. The current subworld civilization process has reached its limit. The destruction of civilization will begin after the natural death of the Terminator, so in theory, it will be very difficult for the new spawned civilization to break through the current perfection level. The rough calculation error is within plus or minus 3%. Boss Luo remembered that the completion level of number 003 subworld was about 47%. The error of 3 points was a minimum of 44%, and a maximum of 50%. He shook his head. Even if it's a positive error, it's only 50%. Number 003 Araya said, "Exceeding the current perfection level is an improvement. Any improvement is the foundation of the final success. So, you still want to save it, right?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "You just care about my attitude." Number 003 Araya was silent for a moment, and finally nodded. "You can recalculate, or guide, or even try to find out if this world still has the potential to evolve," Boss Luo suddenly said. "Anyway, there's still some time before the Terminator. You don't have to rush to prepare for the restart of civilization. In fact, it won't have much impact on you if it's delayed by a few decades, or early by a few decades. The time needed for a civilization to reach its peak is at least a few decades, a few hundred times, or even more. Number 003 Araya didn't speak, but his eyes suddenly flashed. The pitiful gaze that Boss Luo felt seemed to become stronger. I have other uses for the source of will of this world. Boss Luo waved his hand. Don't worry, I'll treat it well, I won't be like this pride. Number 003 Araya nodded silently. There's nothing else to do here. Boss Luo said at this time. The meaning was very clear. Number 003 Araya suddenly said, maybe you can stimulate the completion level of the civilization core through the way of the upheaval of civilization, but this is a risky action. The risk of failure is more than 70%, and it will even destroy the current perfection level data. This is something you should think about. Boss Luo waved his hand. Since your ultimate goal is to create perfection, then you should use any means. Since there's no major breakthrough in the absolutely safe evolution mode in the short term, why don't you try to find ways to correct the wrong mode? Of course, whether you want to do it or not depends on your own thinking. I won't use my authority to force you to change the original script that has already been designed. You've already changed it, and more than once. Respected source authority holder. Number 003 Araya's pitiful eyes suddenly had a sense of bitterness. It must be an illusion or something. Boss Luo also felt that his words just now were a little unconvincing, then he said self-deprecatingly, Okay, I was bluffing, I did do something to you, I'm sorry. Your authority is higher than mine, you don't have to apologize to me. Araya shook his head. I'm just a management tool under the system, I serve for the authority. There's really nothing else to do here. Boss Luo shook his head. He didn't intend to continue arguing with no. 003 Araya, then he thought about it and said, Don't worry, this time I won't let the new script have too many changes, I'll try to minimize the impact. Just treat it as my personal compensation to you last time when I secretly set up the ending. Number 003 Araya was silent for a moment. His figure suddenly faded away, and his last words were, Goodbye. The sea breeze returned to its original gentleness. On the deck of the huge Black Order submarine, there was now only Boss Luo and Miss Maid, other than the already broken shop master Pride. Boss Luo slowly exhaled, looked at Yu Yi, and suddenly laughed. Say, do I look like an unscrupulous boss who exploits a little girl who just joined the company? Miss Maid didn't say anything, she just thought about it and said, Master, to what extent do you plan to reduce the impact? Wait a little longer. Luochio thought about it and said, I'm waiting for Lamia's to come back, and I should be able to see her soon, I have this feeling. As he said that, Boss Luo turned his gaze to the light pillar in the middle of the town. And at this moment, the huge submarine's deck began to crack, piece by piece. Then, the platform in the cabin began to rise. One by one, silver metal dolls about 2.5 meters tall, along with the rising platform, finally appeared. These tall silver metal dolls suddenly squatted down, and then the thrusters on their backs instantly fired. They instantly soared into the sky. At the same time, in the submarine, the chief of the Black Order, Charles, was putting on a silver helmet on his head. His cerebral cortex was surging crazily again. 200 ultimate soldiers. Only I can perfectly control them all at once. Chief Charles muttered at this time. Only someone as strong as me can do it. I need a stronger body that can support my strong psychic power. The world should crawl under me. #########. PS. Try to write the next chapter before 12. Chapter 1633. Lamia's was directly thrown out by the tall warlord like garbage. The good thing was that she finally stopped being dragged, but the bad thing was that she felt pain all over her body after being thrown out like this. How can there be such a weak warrior like you? The tall general snorted. Feed these Pegasi as fast as you can. when the last ray of light of the setting sun ends, they must gallop in the sky again. With that, the tall warlord turned around and left, completely ignoring Lamias, who had an ugly look on her face. Lamias felt that she was naturally weak compared to the human warriors in this divinity's war. She gently rubbed her knees that were already scraped and climbed up with difficulty. Looking forward, she suddenly understood why she had been directly grabbed by the tall battle general. In an open space not far away, there were dozens of snow-white exotic horses with wings on their backs, Pegasi. Beside these Pegasi, there was a female warrior feeding them. Not far away, there was a small camp where a group of warriors with better equipment were resting. Through her special judgment, Lamias guessed that the warriors resting in the camp should be suitable for these Pegasi. As for those female warriors, they should be the coachmen. And Lamias, who had just stripped a female warrior from the wounded camp, was obviously the same as the one feeding the Pegasi. It turned out that she had been treated as one of the female warriors here. Lamias could not leave here. Along the way she had seen all kinds of camp. For her, who had no means of self-protection, she could not defeat any of the warriors. She could probably only bully those poor guys with broken arms and legs in the wounded camp. She could not escape, and there was no reason to be lazy. In this divinity's war, no one could be idle except for those warriors. But obviously, Lamias was now a misunderstood logistician. She silently walked into the group of Pegasi, observing the actions of the female warriors around her. She held the food with both hands and came to a Pegasi that was temporarily unattended. The strange thing was that Lamias didn't have any difficulty communicating in this battle of the gods. She was obviously not familiar with the language here. She could easily understand the language here. At the same time, she could also communicate with the other party without any difficulty. It was as if she was born with it. Lamias could only console herself. At least Luaccio still provided her with the minimum amount of help, so that she would not be unable to understand the language. The female warrior who was feeding the Pegasus did not pay too much attention to the arrival of Lamias. She could see the fear and worry in the eyes of these female warriors. Most of the time, they were exchanging their views on the War of the Gods, as well as some things that happened on the battlefield. This made up for Lamias's lack of knowledge. She quietly walked among the female warriors with her head lowered, quietly collecting all the information she could hear. The current situation was that the battle between the gods, which had been instigated by Hel, had reached its climax. Both sides were in a stalemate, and countless gods were dying every day. Originally, in the beginning, the gods of Mount Olympus, who were connected to the deep sea, had maintained an advantage in the face of Hel's attack. However, the warriors of Hel were difficult to kill. They could return from death through the power of Hades. As for the warriors on Zeus's side, especially the human warriors, they would be infected by Hel after death, turning into warriors of death and joining Hel's camp. Under such circumstances, the underworld gradually recovered from its disadvantage. Now, it was on par with the joint forces of the gods. The main gods on Mount Olympus still maintained great confidence in their victory, but a hint of gloom had quietly appeared. Today, the underworld king Hades suddenly made a move on the battlefield and successfully ambushed the god of war, Ares. He beheaded the god of war and severely injured the god of war's allied forces. Later, the master of the sky angrily attacked and temporarily repelled the underworld king. It was said that the cause of this war was Persephone, the queen of Hel. In the war, Prince Poulin, the young master of Hel, stood out and was remembered by the gods for seriously injuring the hero Hercules. A few days ago, the master of the sky and the master of the sea seemed to have an unpleasant dispute because of the war. Currently, the sea warriors under the Sea King temporarily retreated to the edge of the Gold Coast. Several human countries directly declared their surrender in front of Hel's army. In the human battlefield of the gods' war, Hel's side seemed to have the upper hand. Tonight, the Pegasus camp seemed to have another secret operation. If it was successful, it might effectively affect the situation of the human battlefield. In addition, there were currently 3 commanders on the human battlefield. They were the hero Perseus, the hero Hercules, and the hero Achilles. What kind of chaotic mythological era is this? Lamia was confused by the information she had heard. Her not very rich knowledge of ancient Greek mythology had become more and more chaotic. She couldn't help but think that if this era was based on the Bible, she wouldn't be so passive. Being sent to this distant ancient era of the gods' war was simply a cross-server battle, and there wasn't even the possibility of getting equipment at the beginning. He didn't directly tell me who to help him find. Lamia couldn't help but ponder. But I have a feeling that when I meet the target, I will naturally know. The key is, how can I meet the target? In this war of the gods, humans, demons, hell, and gods. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. There was another problem. If she couldn't find it, did it mean that she had to stay in this era? If she stayed in this era until she died of old age? Unfortunately, this is not a peaceful era. Even if I can't find the target and have to stay in this era, I need to have the power to protect myself. Lamia had never been a person who gave in easily in the face of despair. Otherwise, she would have given up resisting and walked into Master Pride's room. However, in this age of the gods, even her constitution, which she was rather proud of, paled in comparison to the human warriors here. She could not even find the slightest clue as to how to obtain the power to survive here. This is too much. You don't even give me a little time to develop. While she was secretly angry, the Pegasus that she was brushing suddenly pressed Lamia's to the ground. A trace of panic flashed in her eyes. It was said that warriors on the battlefield would go crazy if they were under too much pressure. Could it be that the Pegasus that represented purity also had that kind of need? Her scalp was numb. If that really happened, she would rather kill herself. Sorry. I didn't see anyone here. It turned out that a warrior in bronze armor suddenly leaped onto the Pegasus. Maybe the armor was too heavy, so the Pegasus couldn't stand stably, so Lamia's was pinned under its body. Can you let me get up first? Lamia's face was pale as she frowned and said. The warrior nodded and called out to the Pegasus. Lamia's hurriedly got up and began to size up the warrior on the Pegasus. Male, with short golden hair, determined eyes, and a strong body. He should be a warrior who had experienced hundreds of battles. What's your name? The warrior suddenly lowered his head and asked. Lami. My name is Lami. Lamia's thought for a moment. She didn't know how it would affect her if she said her real name, so she could only do it for now. Lami, is it? I'll remember your name. The warrior nodded and then pulled on the reins. The Pegasus flapped its wings, and a gust of wind suddenly rose as it soared into the sky. Lamia secretly cursed her bad luck. At this time, the female warriors began to gather. The task of feeding the Pegasus had ended. This group of female warriors had worked for almost a day. It was almost time to rest and eat. Lamia lowered her head and mixed in with this group of female warriors. Fortunately, after the female warriors gathered, they were in a hurry. It seemed that no one noticed her unfamiliar face. The rest camp was not far from the Pegasus camp. It was built in a cave. In addition to the female warriors who fed the Pegasus, there were many other soldiers who were logistics personnel. Compared with the soldiers on the frontline battlefield, the soldiers here were obviously less injured. Except for the tired look on their faces, their mental condition was generally good. But with the worsening of the war, how long could they, as logistics soldiers, be at ease? Lamia didn't know where she should live in the camp. She could only find a small cave to hide in and then squeeze in. But until the food was distributed, no one drove her out. She began to silently collect information on the battlefield from these logistics soldiers. At the same time, with a trace of a fluke mentality, she tried to use the ability of composition alchemy. There was nothing. Not to mention the circle formation, she had already understood some knowledge about composition alchemy. But it was as if it had been deleted. Lamias lay in the cave in despair. Her heart was in a mess. The night was getting colder, but it was unusually quiet outside. The two sides of the war seemed to have retreated. Perhaps the moment the sun rose tomorrow, the war would start again. After all, this was the battlefield of the human kingdom. It was not like the battlefield of the demons and the gods. The army of the underworld had the ability to increase at night, so they would attack crazily at night. She didn't know if the big action at night that the general who had punched her in the stomach would succeed. After thinking about it for a while, Lamias was so tired that she fell asleep directly. Just like that, she struggled to get through the first day on the main god's battlefield. Lami! Lami! Which one of you is Lami? Lami! A hurried voice came from outside the cave. Lamias was awakened by hunger. When she heard the voice outside, she didn't react for a while. Lami, the female warrior who fed at the Pegasus camp yesterday, is she here? If she's not dead, say something. Looking for me? Lamias frowned. She didn't reveal the name of Lami to anyone here, only the young man in bronze armor. Lami, are you here or not? If not, I'm going to leave. I'm here. Lamias gritted her teeth and crawled out of the cave. She shouted towards the direction of the voice. She saw a man wearing skirted armor and a short sword. Why did you only respond now? The man frowned in dissatisfaction, then walked directly towards Lamias. The man was carrying a basket in his hand. He handed the basket to Lamias, then said in a low voice, Lord Satyr asked me to give this to you as compensation for injuring you yesterday. Accept it well. Thank you. Lamias reached out and took it. She could already smell a trace of food in the basket. Satyr. Is that the name of the young man in bronze armor? She wanted to find out more, so she looked around and found that many people were looking at her, especially the female warriors who were feeding the Pegasus in the same team. Their gazes were burning. Please thank Lord Satyr for me, Lamia said quickly. Tell him that I like this gift very much. The man didn't speak, just nodded and left. Lamias lifted the cloth of the basket and took a look. In addition to some rare fresh food, there were some fruits, which were more precious on the battlefield. You know Lord Satyr? At this time, a female warrior who fed the Pegasus suddenly came to Lamias. You're called Lami? Why haven't I seen you before? I'm new here, Lamias said quickly. Yesterday, I was caught from another camp by him. Many of the female warriors saw Lamias being dragged into the Pegasus camp yesterday, but they didn't go forward to ask. Suyao, captain of the Pegasus camp. Let's get to know each other. The female warrior. Suyao nodded at this time, and then looked at the basket in Lamia's hand. I can't finish so much by myself. Lamia smiled and said, Why don't we share it? Lami, you've won my friendship. Suyao nodded and then waved her hand. A female warrior came over, took the man out, and began to distribute fresh food to the other female warriors. The food was at most for 2 people, which was obviously not enough for distribution. Everyone just tasted the freshness, but they were more satisfied. At least when they looked at Lamias, they were less indifferent. Suyao sat beside Lamias and said casually, The person who caught you yesterday is called Morgan. He is a manager of this logistics camp. You offended him, so your life may not be easy. But it's different now. Since you know Sir Satyr, Morgan won't make things difficult for you in the future. This Sir Satyr is? Lamias smiled bitterly and said, I came from another camp, so I'm not sure. You don't know? Suyao was surprised and then shook her head. The battlefield of the gods was very chaotic. In the battlefield of the human countries, no one knew what happened every day. Sir Satyr is the bronze saint of Aquila constellation, the subordinate of the silver saint of Hound constellation, Adine. He is only 19 years old and has a bright future. You don't know. Bronze saint. Aquila constellation? Hound constellation. Silver saint? What cough cough cough? Lamias, who was drinking water, almost choked to death. A mouthful of water mist spurted out. Is there a Pegasus constellation called Star Sure here? Lamias asked with a headache. Suya looked at Lamias suspiciously and shook her head. Isn't that Sir of Pegasus constellation the commander of our Pegasus camp? He's not called Star Sure. Lamias heard this and her eyebrows twitched a few times. What kind of ancient Greek kingdom is this? Hashtag 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 hashtag. Chapter 1634. How come I don't know about Pegasus? I also know about Phoenix and Andromeda. Don't think I haven't seen Uncle Che Tion's Sex Fighter. Yes, I have. It's just a BL comic. Haha. Suya and her friends went to share the fresh food in the basket, leaving Lamias alone to digest the information she had just heard. After asking around, Lamias learned that the Pegasus Battalion's action last night was a success. They destroyed one of the main granaries of the enemy camp and greatly weakened the morale and ability of the enemy camp of Hades. At present, the generals of the allied forces of the gods were chasing after the enemy, intending to expand the victory. This was the first major victory of the gods since the beginning of the War of God. They were all discussing this matter. The depressed atmosphere in the logistics camp yesterday seemed to be swept away. Lamias also felt a little relieved. At least, if the war was going to worsen, she would be sent to the front line sooner or later if she stayed in the logistics camp. It would be difficult to escape. According to Suya, there were special wizards in the allied forces who would monitor deserters at any time. This was the battlefield of the god. Who knew what kind of horrible power the wizards in the mythological era had? At present, the allied forces have won a great victory. It should be relatively safe. Lamias thought to herself, since I want to find someone, I might as well take this time. In the next few days, with the success of the Pegasus Battalion's secret operation, the news of the Allied forces' great victory came. Occasionally, there was even some news on the battlefield of the god. Last time, when the Lord of Hades killed Ares, the god of war, he was seriously injured by the angry Lord of the Sky and the other main gods. At present, the Lord of Hades' side in the battlefield of the gods was also in a defensive state. They seemed to have seen the dawn of victory. The soldiers of the Allied forces were obviously in a good mood, but Lamias was not. For the next few days, she spent all her free time wandering around the barrack. She didn't know who she was looking for. She only knew that if she met him, she would feel something. However, she didn't know what this feeling was. In general, for the next few days, she didn't feel anything special. Instead, she became familiar with the logistics camp. It seems that the person I am looking for is not in this logistics camp. Then, Lamias, who was carrying a bucket of feed to the Pegasus Battalion, could not help but frown. I want to go to another camp. He hoped that the person he was looking for could be found in the human nations of the Allied army. If it was in the enemy camp, it would be quite a headache. But if it was really in the enemy camp, he could think of a way. But if it was in the battlefield of the gods, she would never forget the first time she came to this battlefield of the gods. That scene was like a meteor crashing into the ground. She would die. She would definitely die. Lamia? Lamia, you're Lamia. Amanzes. It's really you, Lamia. The young bronze saint of Aquila had a hearty smile on his face. Lamias paused for a moment before whispering, I'm sorry, Lord Satyr. You're not wearing your armor. I didn't recognize you at first. It takes a lot of stamina to wear the bronze saint robe. When not in battle, it is usually stored in the saint robe chest. Satyr seemed to be in a good mood today. He joked, How is it? Do I look more handsome when I'm wearing the saint robe? Perhaps it was because a crooked stick would have a crooked shadow. Not to mention the messy private life of the Sky Lord on Mount Pantheon, the human nations were also very open at the moment. Last night, Suya had quietly asked Lamias if she was interested in going to the Pegasus Knight's tent. Of course, she refused. Although she was very open about it, there was no coercion. On the battlefield, there were many times when morality was relaxed. Perhaps Satyr just wanted to release the pressure of the past few days of fighting. I've always worshipped Saint Seiya's. Lamias looked up, stars flashing in her eyes. Satyr laughed happily. Then, he rolled his eyes and said, "Wait for me. Go, walking hormone. I know what you want to do." Lamias narrowed her eyes at once. She felt that the key to leaving this logistics camp and going to other places was probably on this bronze satyr. Soon, Satyr returned with a huge bronze chest. At first, Lamias had some reservations about the Saint Seiya's that Suya mentioned. But when she saw the bronze chest Satyr was carrying, well, this was definitely not the ancient Greek divine kingdom in official history. Lamias even vaguely felt that this world where the Greek gods appeared was a different place from the world she originally lived in. "Lammy, do you want me to show it to you here?" Satyr smiled, revealing his white teeth that were so bright that they could almost shine. Lamias quickly said, "My lord, I think we need some food. Today's weather is good and I've finished my work early. I know a very good and quiet stream ahead. It will be a good place for a picnic." Satyr's mood was getting better. As a holy cloth warrior with a rich future, he had a lot of privileges in the camp. Food and wine were things that could be prepared in an instant. A moment later, the two appeared beside a quiet stream outside the camp. Lamias carefully arranged the picnic items and asked about Satyr's experience of becoming a Saint Seiya's. The experience of becoming a Saint Seiya's was something worth bragging about, at least for Satyr. He was very happy to talk about it. Every warrior who aspires to become a Saint Seiya's has to go through strict training since young. In the sanctum, there are many young people like me who dream of becoming a bronze saint since young. My teacher has never been able to become a bronze saint in his entire life. I am his greatest hope. Lamias poured Satyr a glass of wine. "Is it really so difficult to become a bronze saint?" "It's difficult. Even for me, it's just because of good luck." Satyr recalled, "We trained our bodies to the limit, endured pain far beyond the limits of the human body, and kept suppressing the potential in the body. Only the strongest body can withstand the power of the holy cloth. In addition, you also need to have the characteristics of the holy cloth to be recognized by it. There was once someone who defeated many opponents and was called the strongest in the competition for the holy cloth, but in the end, he could not get the recognition of the holy cloth. He was just an ordinary warrior in old age." The characteristics of the holy cloth? Lamias blinked, her eyes were like silk. "My lord, what are your characteristics?" "I am a spirit that pursues freedom." Satyr smiled and said, "My compatibility with the Aquila constellation holy cloth is the highest among the warriors of the same generation. Of course, I am also the strongest among the warriors of the same generation." "You are really amazing." Lamias's face was full of admiration and immediately asked, "But, if someone can't get the recognition of the holy cloth, is there really no way to wear the holy cloth?" Satyr said seriously, "Without the recognition of the holy cloth, if you want to wear the holy cloth by force, the final result will be to be destroyed by the holy cloth's strong power." Lamias's face was full of fear. Satyr laughed and stood up. At this time, the chest of the bronze holy cloth suddenly opened, and a green light was emitted. Lamias watched all of this happen. She saw the Aquila constellation holy cloth in the chest fly out one by one, and then attach to Satyr's body. "You are really too heroic, Lord Satyr." Lamias continued to pour wine. Satyr, who had a strong body, didn't care about the wine at all, as if he was drinking water. Speaking of which, Satyr was not old, and became a bronze saint at the age of 19. He also wanted to be like the other warriors in the camp, to be able to maintain a relationship with a few young and beautiful women, and, before this Lamy, he had already succeeded. With the identity of a bronze saint, coupled with his young strength and handsome appearance, the women in the camp couldn't resist at all. Satyr, who already had experience, looked at Lamias with burning eyes, and continued to send out signals called hormones. Finally, under a burst of heat, Satyr directly removed the bronze holy cloth and reached out to lift Lamias's chin. Lamias, I liked you very much when I first saw you. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. After this war of the gods is over, marry me. These were obviously very affectionate words. Lamias's eyelashes moved slightly, and like a frightened animal, she gently pushed Satyr away and lowered her head. I heard that many women also like you, Lord. They can't compare to you. Satyr's body became more and more hot, and then he directly pounced on her. Lamias gently dodged to the side, and Satyr, who pounced on nothing, immediately fell to the ground, and then he didn't stand up again. Lamias frowned and muttered, "The physique of these Saint Seiya's is really terrifying. If a Pegasus was always in a battle posture, it would be quite excited and unable to rest. Therefore, in order to let the Pegasus rest well, the female warriors in charge of feeding the Pegasus would usually use a special kind of herbal concoction to help the Pegasus fall asleep. A whole 3 times the amount of herbal concoction. After a long while, Satyr finally fell asleep. Lamias shook her head and stood up. After casually kicking Satyr a few times, she sneered, "You want to sleep with me? Little brat who hasn't even grown hair yet. Okay, you can come out now, Nimit." Lamias quickly said at this time, and the next moment, a fat and strong woman rushed out of the forest. Nimitz was also a female warrior in charge of feeding the Pegasus in the Pegasus camp. She was a woman with huge desires, but unfortunately, no one cared about her. Nimitz, who was twice the size of Lamias and had a fierce face, walked over at this time. "Are you really going to give this opportunity to me? Haven't you always wanted to sleep with the Saint Seiya's?" Lamias quickly said, "Look at him, young, handsome, and has a bright future. How perfect is this body?" The woman with a fierce face couldn't help but breathe quickly, but she was hesitant. "If Lord Satyr wakes up, it's just a short-lived marriage," Lamias smiled and said. "Do you think Satyr will announce this after he wakes up? This may be your only chance. Why do you want to help me?" Nimitz looked at Lamias warily, but her eyes were unable to leave Satyr's strong body. "I need the identity of Satyr's lover," Lamias said indifferently, "but I don't want to give myself to him, so I need a substitute. If you don't agree, I'll do it myself, and then you'll continue to be the Nimitz that no one cares about." "Lord Satyr, Lord Satyr." Nimitz seemed to be possessed as she kept repeating this name. Suddenly, she pounced on Satyr's body. Lamias sneered and slowly backed away. Lick me, at least you won't lose everything, at least you'll sleep with me." Nimitz finally remembered that there was an audience beside them and regained some of her rationality. She hurriedly carried Satyr and walked behind a huge rock. Lamias picked up an apple and bit into it, then her gaze landed on the box that contained the Aquila constellation Saint Cloth. She hesitated for a moment, then finally walked to the front of the box and reached out to touch it. But just as her fingers touched the box, she felt an electric force prickling her fingers. She couldn't help but retract her hand, and at the same time, she broke out in cold sweat. What is this?" It was something that peeked out from Satyr's clothes. It was a purple crystal that was about the size of a thumb. From behind the huge rock, she could faintly hear Nimitz's voice. Other things aside, Nimitz's voice was actually quite pleasant to listen to. Lamias fainted and goosebumps rose all over her body. She casually picked up the purple crystal from his clothes. At that moment, the purple crystal in her hand suddenly emitted a faint light. The faint light shot into Lamias's eyes. Lamias was momentarily dazed. After a while, she softly groaned and fell to the ground with an exhausted expression. She took in big breaths and muttered to herself. Saint Cloth Communication Meditation Training. Training? Lamias suddenly looked in the direction of the huge rock, then said with slight anger, "You damn satyr, you actually dared to lie to me. Nimitz, I still have an energy herb here for the Pegasus, do you want it? Give it to me. ######## PS. The next chapter will be before 12 //. Chapter 1635. It was called the Seed of Power, and it was the power of the soul. When the seed broke through the soil of the soul, it would awaken the hidden power. The human body was like a small universe with a treasure trove, containing a ruthless and endless power. The gods had handed the key to opening the treasure trove into the hands of the humans, allowing them to have the ability to resist the monsters. Unknowingly, it's already been 10 days since I started meditating. In the karst cave where she was resting, Lamia slowly opened her eyes. After a night of meditation training, she only felt sore all over, but her spirit was unexpectedly strong, and her thoughts had become sharper. This seems to be a sign that only appears after completing the initial stage of meditation training. Her active thoughts made Lamia's frown. According to the meditation technique of the amethyst inheritance, it seemed that without 1 or 2 years of hard work, it would be impossible to achieve such results. Moreover, even if it was hard work, it was the hard work of those with talent. I've only trained for 10 days, how can it be so fast? Could it be because this is the age of the gods, and it's far from the trough of transcendence in my time? With the small success of the meditation technique, Lamia's could vaguely feel that there was a huge power all around her, but she was completely unable to pry open this power. This is the key to entering the inhuman realm. Lamia's was delighted. Even when she was a combat nun of the Black Order, she had not been able to step into the inhuman realm as she wished, and could only rely on external objects. It's a pity that obtaining the key to becoming an inhuman is in an era where death is imminent. After shaking her head and tidying up her clothes, Lamia's walked out of the cave where she was resting. At this moment, Nimitz, who was not far away, immediately walked up to her. Similar things had happened twice in the past 10 days. Nimitz, who was hungry for more, had even moved to live next door to Lamia's so that he could find an opportunity as soon as possible. "You're too diligent." Lamia's could not help but frown. Although the camp is open, it's not every day that you can find an opportunity. If you squeeze too much of Satyr's strength out, it will affect his performance on the battlefield. "No, it's not." Nimitz pulled Lamia's to the side and said in a low voice, "I wanted to tell you that it's not convenient for me these 2 days. You better not go find Lord Satyr. Otherwise, you will be in danger." Lamia's couldn't help but be startled. Did this Nimitz already consider Satyr as his personal property? Was that why he was worried that he would go back on his word and fight personally? It was really too rare to see her pull a certain someone. Even if she wanted to sleep with someone, it would at least be at the level of the manor's owner. "I understand. I'll see what I can do." "That's great." Nimitz nodded and quickly took out the food. "I was worried about you. I got these for you this morning. They're even better than Sister Suya's." Lamia's thought for a while and said, "Don't get too close to me. Otherwise, it'll be easy for people to find out. Thank you for the food." Nimitz revealed a smile that could be considered good-looking for someone with a fierce face like her. "I know. I came to find you because Sister Suya and the others aren't here. They went out so early." Lamia's was startled. "Yes, I don't know what they're going to do. They're so mysterious." Nimitz shook her head and then said faintly, "They don't like to be with me and rarely talk to me. I'm going out later." Lamia's nodded. Nimitz immediately said, "Don't worry, I'll help you with your work." Are you not feeling well these 2 days?" Lamia's frowned. She knew that ever since the first time, Nimitz had been trying to curry favor with her. This kind of lowly behavior made Lamia's feel strange. "It's fine, my body is very strong," Nimitz said with a silly smile. "I know you have something to do. In the camp, there's basically no one who has a reason to talk to me, only you are different. And you let me and Sir Satyr. Although I know this is all an illusion, But I really have to thank you. Really, Lamias, I won't ruin your relationship. I'll help you keep this a secret. I don't want anything. You? Lamias opened her mouth, and the strange feeling in her heart gradually turned into irritation. You don't want anything? Nimitz opened her mouth and then lowered her head. She stroked her stomach and said, If possible, I hope to be pregnant with Sir Satyr's child. After this war is over, I'll take the child away and raise it. I won't tell anyone, and I don't plan to tell anyone. Lamias was silent for a moment. In a few days, I'll find an opportunity to ask Satyr out. Nimitz looked up at Lamias and said softly, Lamias, are we friends? No. Sister Nun didn't look back at this time and directly walked out. But under Nimitz's absent-minded gaze, she suddenly turned around and said, Don't go out today, rest for a day. I'll finish your job. I don't have anything special today, that's all. Lamias came to the Pegasus field, and found that some female soldiers had already started working, but she didn't see Sister Suya and several other female soldiers who had a good relationship with her. She couldn't help but feel strange. But she didn't care too much, and started to work with 2 people. She originally planned to leave the Pegasus camp early, but after unexpectedly obtaining Satyr's meditation training technique, she changed her mind. It's amazing. After completing the initial stage of meditation training, I seem to be able to feel some thoughts of the Pegasus, although it's very vague. Lamias was quite surprised. There was no one at the moment. Lamias made up her mind and wanted to ride the Pegasus that she had been feeding for a long time. If she could ride the Pegasus and not be rejected by it, it seemed that she would have the opportunity to be promoted to a Pegasus Knight. At present, although the battle of the gods was in favor of the gods, there were still many casualties. In the formation of the Pegasus Knights, there were already many soldiers who couldn't fight because of serious injuries. But when she was thrown to the ground by a huge force, Lamias knew that she had become too full of herself at the moment when her vision was reversed. Ha ha ha, Lamias, you can't ride the Pegasus just because you want to. It was Satyr's voice that came with a smile. Lamias climbed up expressionlessly. This guy actually stood there foolishly to watch a joke. Until he saw that Lamias's expression was a little strange, he hurried forward in a panic. Lamias, are you hurt? Did you fall anywhere? Haha. Now she didn't have to worry about letting Nimitz replace her. Originally, she more or less felt guilty towards Satyr. No more. Iron Man. Next time, I will prepare 2 portions of vitality herbs for Nimitz, 3 portions. Lamias? I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Lamias, listen to me. Lamias. After finishing her work, Lamias walked out directly. Satyr could only accompany her in a low voice. He was really obsessed with Lamias. Every time he was delirious, it was as if he was lost in the great starry sky, as if he was wandering the Milky Way. Although every time it was so abstract, every time, he could always hear the sweet moans of 100 roars and 1,000 soft moans. Every time he thought of it, Satyr had a feeling that he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. How could 1 time be enough? 2 times wasn't enough, even if it was 3 days and 3 nights. Lamias, there is no battle today. I can move freely until dusk. Oh, is that so? Then you should have a good rest, Master Satyr. You need to replenish your strength and fight for the kingdom, fight for the glory of the gods. Lamias, how can you forgive me? Satyr frowned, with a hint of dissatisfaction. Lamias said with grievance, I am working hard in Pegasus camp alone, but you come to laugh at me, and now you are treating me like this. Satyr, I think we should end this wrong relationship. You are not a man worthy of my sacrifice. Do you know? Other than you, the other warriors are also very good to me. I am the only 2 Saint Seiya in Pegasus camp, Satyr said angrily. Other than Master Pegasus Constellation, I am the strongest here. How can they compare to me? At least, those people are loyal enough, right? Lamias said miserably. At least, they will treat me wholeheartedly, and not use me as a tool to vent. Master Satyr, please let me go, okay? It's not like this, Lamias. It's not like what you think. Satyr panicked. I don't have many women. Don't listen to other people's nonsense. I only have you now. In a hurry, he directly grabbed Lamias's wrist, but was pushed away by Lamias. How long are you going to play with me? Lamias said angrily. Other than getting people to send me some food, what else did you do for me? Do you know what kind of life I am living here, what kind of bullies I am being bullied? Do I have to endure this, and then you only need to use a dog's finger, and I will crawl to your side like a bitch? Someone bullied you? Satyr's eyes flashed coldly at this time. Who is it? Lamias shook her head and said sadly, Forget it, that's my own business. Satyr, after experiencing you, I finally understand that men can't be relied on. I can only rely on myself. Without great power, no one can protect me. You can't, even if you are a bronze saint, but that's only you, not me. Lamias, do you really want to get power? Satyr gritted his teeth at this time, and suddenly asked with a somewhat dignified expression. Lamias was startled, and felt that something seemed wrong, but she couldn't stop acting, so she said with a complicated expression, Satyr, when you were weak, how much did you desire power? I didn't intend to tell you, but… Satyr took a deep breath, and pressed his hands on Lamias's shoulders. But I don't want to lose you even more, Lamias. There is a chance to get power, do you want to fight for it? Lamias couldn't help but widen her eyes. Was love in the age of gods really so simple? Nimitz was like this, and Satyr seemed to be like this too? What did you say? Satyr pulled Lamias to a corner, and then said slowly, The Grus Saint Seiya died of serious injuries 3 days ago, and now in the sanctuary, the people who can inherit the Cygnus Saint Cloth are. Grus Saint Cloth is one of the few saint cloth that is more suitable for women. Do you understand what I mean? You want me to challenge to inherit the Grus Saint Cloth? Lamias didn't care whether she was thinking about acting or not, she was really very surprised at this time. Yes, this is your only chance to get power. Satyr nodded. But not everyone can challenge to inherit the Saint Cloth, there must be a recommendation. I am a Grus Saint Seiya, and I have the qualifications to recommend, but to be honest, I didn't intend to recommend you at first, because I know there are people more suitable than you. So, if you don't have the halo of a bronze Saint Seiya, don't even think about finding a girlfriend in this life, trash. Wait a minute, Big Sister Suya and the other few female warriors are so mysterious, could it be related to the heavenly crane constellation Saint Cloth? Obviously, other than herself, there were a few female warriors in the camp who also took the same path, trying their best to get close to those warriors who looked promising at the front line. Lamias? You don't want to go? Satyr asked nervously. Lamias shook her head. There must be a lot of people who can inherit the Saint Cloth this time, right? Of course. Satyr nodded. Every current Saint Seiya can nominate, the commanders of the various armies can also nominate, the royal family of the human kingdom, as well as some aristocrats and city lords, and also some descendants of heroes. There will be at least 1,000 candidates on the list, roughly estimating that there will be at least 1,000 candidates who will go to the sacred region. Sacred region. Lamias lowered her head and didn't say anything. For the inheritance of the Saint Cloth this time, Lady Athena will also come personally. Satyr once again threw out a piece of heavy news, smiled and said, Maybe this time, it may be the only time you can personally meet God, of course, if there is a 1 in 1,000 chance that you can inherit the Grus Saint Cloth, that would be good. So many opponents. Lamias shook her head and looked at Satyr, feeling wronged. Those candidates have a lot of support behind them. How can I break through the crowd alone? Indeed. Satyr nodded. These candidates are all sacred warriors who have been training for a long time, and they have been preparing for a long time to get the chance to inherit the Saint Cloth. But you don't have to be discouraged, Lamias, because you have me. It's here, it's finally here, the Tool Man. Satyr, you are so good to me. Lamias looked at him emotionally. Satyr said affectionately, yes, you have me. I will give you unlimited spiritual support behind your back. Look at me, Lamias, when you are in despair, please think of me, think of my eyes, my voice. I will always be with you. Lamias, I will wait for you here, whether you succeed or fail, I will wait for you here. Oh, you can go die now, Toolman. Goodbye. #########################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################